Chapter 1490. Fortunately, although the return journey was thrilling and exciting, it was just a scare without any real danger. Everyone cried out in pain during the journey, and it was only when they returned to the coastal waters that they calmed down a little. Many people suspected that their souls had been separated from their bodies. The quality of the ship is pretty good. Yin Nuashing knocked on the side of the ship and accidentally opened a gap. He looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to him. He quickly gathered the broken pieces and pressed them back into the gap. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He was too full of himself. The next second, he was slapped in the face. The young man stood calmly on the platform behind him with a calm face. During the period when the ship was seriously speeding, he had been maintaining this calm posture. He claimed that if the captain was calm, the crew would be calm as well. However, Yin Nuashing felt that this theory was useless. He could tell by looking at the people lying on the ground. No one could remain calm. Even the young man himself, ignoring the sweat on his face and his trembling legs, he still looked quite calm. Yin Nuashing coughed dryly with a guilty look on his face. Actually, this matter was somewhat related to him. When he used his energy to repair the ship's power source, he used a little bit of his order power to repair it. Then, this little bit of order power caused the ship's energy to overflow. If it didn't deal with it, it would explode. Obviously, it wasn't a good idea for him to intervene now, as it would only make things worse. Therefore, he could only transfer all the excess energy to his speed and shield. Facing the sea and the blue sky, he didn't know how many miles per hour he was going. Although he felt free, he guessed that the others would feel more devastated. Get up, get up. How can a child of the sea return to the coast with seasickness? Do you want to be plastered on the city's gatehouse and be laughed at for hundreds of years? The young man walked down from the platform and shouted at everyone. He took a colored flag and jumped up to the mast. He hung the flag in his hand before jumping down. After doing this, his legs seemed to have turned to jelly. Yin Nuashing raised his head and looked at the flag. It was a flag covered in colors. For the time being, he did not know what effect this flag had on this ship. However, he could roughly guess that it was either to show his identity or to show his intentions. After a wild ride, the group of people had already returned to the coastal area. Looking into the distance, they could see the coast, and a blurry shadow appeared bit by bit. On Yunua planet, they could see the rough outline of a city, and they could even see the towering mountains on the ground. When his eyes drifted around the world, he had already caught a glimpse of this coastal city or something similar. However, when it really appeared in his sight and he could observe it directly, he was still a little surprised. This was a huge city built half on land and half on the sea. It was circular in shape and had a radius of about 200 to 300 miles. The half on the sea was larger and more spacious than the one built on land. There were also many buildings that he could not recognize. The style was different from the style of all the worlds he had seen. That was nonsense. The rules of this world were less than 10% similar to the rules of all the worlds he knew. It was already amazing to see a creation that was 30% similar to this world. If it were not for the higher level of the human race in the void, he would not be surprised if there were other strange life forms here. Yin Nuashing saw a huge silver-white metal building. It was about 1,000 meters tall and was much taller than all the surrounding buildings. The entire top was a huge spherical object, but it was cut in half. The protruding sides of the two hemispheres were facing the direction of the ocean like two metal lands. He sensed a large amount of energy from the two hemispheres, but the energy seemed to be stored there and was not really used for anything. Yin Nuashing looked at Yin Nuashing and saw a huge silver-white metal building. It was about 1,000 meters tall and was much taller than all the surrounding buildings. Perhaps because he had been staring at the silver-white building for too long, the teenager looked at him for a while and explained, "That's the defense line and the energy center of the coastal city. It's normal for you to find it familiar. Every coastal city has one." Yin Nuashing responded with a smile. It felt good to have someone help him fill in the gaps. He did not have to make up so many strange things himself. With a little speculation, he could find 10,000 loopholes. He could not use the Book of the Epics now. The damage of the rules still needed to be healed bit by bit. But as for the defensive line, Howard could see some signs of energy flowing in the space around the coastal city. It was probably something like an energy barrier, and it was open to both sides. The dense energy flow area was facing the ocean and the inland at the same time. This seemed to confirm his guess. There were threats even inland. There was still a short period of time before they returned to Seaside City. Yin Nuoxing casually found an excuse to lie on the side of the ship and observe the entire continent. Before he could switch his line of sight to look down at the earth from above, his vision suddenly became blurry. At the same time, there was a faint tingling in his mind, causing him to be shocked and quickly retract the perception he had spread out. It's actually wary of me. Yin Nuoxing showed an interesting expression. The power of the rules of this world. A certain existence that occupied the commanding heights of the rules of this world carefully monitored this world. It had already found the outsider who trespassed into this world, and it had even used a part of the rules to restrict him. However, he did not think that that thing could completely restrict him. It could be seen that it did not have the courage to directly attack him. It was just a newly born conceptual consciousness. It could not punish him. At most, it could only issue a warning to him. Yin Nuoxing rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Since the conceptual consciousness of this world was wary of his existence, then he should act less recklessly. For the time being, he should behave himself before the damage of the rules recovered. After all, it couldn't do anything to him. After it recovered, it would be even more helpless against him. While waiting for the ship to dock, Yin Nuoxing had been curiously observing the city. A lot of thoughts were running in his mind. For example, he was thinking about the energy flow pattern of this world. The next second, he would be curious about the so-called inland. Then, he would turn to the teenager and tell him about the way to travel in coastal cities. The teenager also chatted with him. The connection between coastal cities was naturally through ships. In addition to fishing boats like theirs, there were larger passenger ships, which were said to be able to carry millions of people at a time, and there were several power stones. As for the inland, we hardly go to the inland, but there are people from the inland who come to coastal cities. Every time they come on something like a modified ship. There's no mast, no bow, and the like. It looks heavier, and they have more defensive stones than power stones. The teenager showed a thoughtful look and said as he thought, "The inland people often come to the coast." Yin Nuoxing tilted his head. "Are they here to trade?" The teenager shook his head. "They're here to get the goods. The power from the inland protects the coast and suppresses the sea of the world. Our coast is responsible for providing supplies to the inland. Of course, we also do some small-scale trade, but the quantity is not as good as the former. Like the power stones, control stones, and various other power stones that we commonly use, and the line of defense of coastal cities, which is the energy center, are all brought by the inland people, and we use them to maintain our normal lives." "Oh," Yin Nuoxing said. "On one hand, they provide protection and power, and on the other hand, they provide resources. It's very reasonable." However, he felt a little nervous in the young man's words. He wasn't nervous about the people on the mainland, but about something on the mainland. The young man should know something, but it's not convenient to tell him now. He thought for a moment and did not speak first. It seemed a little rash to suddenly ask questions that he, an amnesiac, should not care about. So he casually changed the topic and talked about coastal cities. At the same time, he continued to observe the city that was very clear now. The city was laid out in a staircase that was dozens of meters above the ground. Many huge metal strips spread out from it, a little like the pipes he saw on Dao Tian's ship. Some of them were placed disorderly inland, while others were neatly and orderly directed to every corner of the coastal city. Between those pipes, there was a blue light overflowing. He thought for a moment and felt that those pipes should be used to transport energy. The whole city was arranged in a fan shape around the energy center, and behind the energy center was the inland. As the ship approached the coast, Yin Nuoxing heard other sounds besides the waves and the wind again. They stopped at a place that extended more than 100 miles out from the ocean. It was part of a huge, fan-shaped platform. It seemed that the deeper they went into the ocean, the larger the platform area would be. They stopped at the edge of the fan-shaped platform. Yin Nuashing followed the teenager onto the huge white platform. Others might not feel it, but Yin Nuashing could feel that when he stepped on the platform shook slightly. It was a man-made. Oh, nonsense. It was a platform that floated on the sea. It was very heavy. It was connected to the platform in the inner circle through pipes similar to the ones he saw just now. It was not so that every platform would drift away with the waves. At the edge of the platform, there was a 2-meter-high energy stone erected at regular intervals. The faint light that it emitted told others that the energy stone was working. As for its function, it probably had something to do with the platform itself. What if the pipes break? Won't these platforms float away directly? A voice suddenly rang in Yun Nuashing's mind, startling him. It seemed that he had been nagging in his mind for too long. He finally woke up the little angel, who had fainted because of the vibration of the rules. He saw her stretching and then subconsciously combing her feathers in his soul. He shrugged and said, "There are also energy stones at the edge of the platform. They are probably used to balance and stabilize these platforms." He glanced at the bottom of the sea. It was empty. Other than the energy stones at the edge, the only thing that maintained the stability of each platform was the pipes that were connected to it. Probably, unless they had other things that he did not know the purpose of. Every time I come to a new world, I feel like a country bumpkin entering a city. Everything is new to me. I thought I have seen enough worlds to get rid of this situation. Yun Nuashing muttered in his mind. The little angel heard him and said, "But I didn't expect that the new worlds I have been to are all new and unique worlds." Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. His view of the world was refreshed again and again. This void is really strange. A sea urchin can evolve into a world. Ahem. Looking at the entire city from the farthest end of the coastal city, half of the things were blocked and nothing could be seen. The only thing that could be seen clearly was this. Yin Nuashing looked down at the port platform where they were. A large number of ships were moored at the edge of the platform. The people on the ships and the people on the shore were moving the goods on the ships. The wet white platform was left with countless dirty footprints, but they would magically clean themselves after a while. The ship behind him was also unloading the day's harvest under the command of the young man. After a while, Uncle Zhao took over his position. The young man walked to the side, found the others on the platform, and brought them to his ship. It even caused a small commotion. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. He noticed that there was a thin layer of transparent energy barrier in the sky. It seemed to be the energy barrier that he saw when he stepped onto the platform. The energy reaction was quite weak to him. It covered the entire coastal city and even extended outwards. The entire coastal city, including the port, was completely protected by it. As for its defensive power, he felt that he could break it with just one finger. While he was an alien from the outside world and should not blindly compare it with the things in this world, he still did not know what its defensive power was. Yin Nuashing suddenly noticed an aura. He turned back to look at the blue flag of the ship. The aura on the flag was exactly the same as the energy barrier of the city. All the ships docked at the port also had the same flag. It was probably the symbol of the pass. The air inside the barrier was also very different from the air outside. When he reached the coastal area, he could feel an uncomfortable aura. It seemed to be coming from the inland. It was like something was being burned on a large scale. It was mixed with a foul smell that he hated. It was a bit like the product of the collision between the forces of order and chaos. However, the smell in the air outside was quite faint. He did not notice any reaction from the teenager and the others to the smell. They seemed to have gotten used to it. The little angel looked at the busy port from his perspective. He had just woken up and was still yawning. He was too lazy to get out of the fusion state. After all, he was used to it. There were fishing boats of the same size on the port platform. Many people were busily moving goods to and fro. He could smell the strong smell of seafood with a casual breath. It was just a little fishy. Listening to the conversations of the people here, other than the Luoyang Black Sea that the teenager and the others went to, there seemed to be goods from other sea areas gathered here. After listening for a while, he could hear the names of 3 or 4 sea areas. If he continued listening, he would just repeat the names. It seemed that this coastal city was closer to these sea areas. The busy atmosphere made Yun Nuashing, who was staying here, feel a little bored. He walked into the platform and laid a few spacious metal plates above the pipes that connected to the inner ring platform. After stepping on the metal plates, he could step onto another platform, but there did not seem to be anything worth paying attention to here. Perhaps the heavens did not want him to feel bored with this world. Before he could wander around the other platform for 2 minutes, a low roar suddenly came from below. Then the surrounding platforms shook violently. Earthquake! Bah! The sea was shaking. This was what he felt in an instant. The surrounding white platforms shook violently with the sudden turbulence of the sea. However, as the energy stones set up on the edge of the platforms lit up one by one, the shaking platforms quieted down in an instant. He guessed right. The stones only had a few uses. After a few seconds, he reacted abruptly, and his expression changed. Whenever he came to a new world and suddenly made a big commotion, it was usually that thing that caused his body to act up. Seeing that he was too relaxed, he quickly woke up. It was like that 100 million years ago, and it was probably the same now. Yin Nuashing turned his head and looked around. He was stunned when he saw that the guards on the platforms were still chatting calmly. There seems to be a lot of activity recently. The deep sea. Who knows what happened there? Anyway, it can't be anything good. The previous activity made the higher-ups nervous, but nothing seems to have happened in the past 10 days. I heard that a few of the shattered shores felt the sea shaking frequently before they were destroyed. I don't know if there is a definite connection between them. After all, the threat of the deep sea. Speaking of which, the people from the inland said something similar when they came last time. Didn't they say the same thing when they helped us install the sea calming stone? The stability is going to decline again? Then we have to be the ones in charge. It's not time yet. Don't be too nervous. There's no point in scaring yourself. That's true. Yin Nuashing heaved a sigh of relief after a series of nagging. It sounded like there was already some movement before he came. Then maybe it had nothing to do with him. Anyway, the people in this world did not make any movements. Why would he be nervous? After about 2 to 3 minutes, the seawater recovered its tranquility. Closely after that, everything in the surroundings became quiet one after another. The radiance of the energy ores also gradually dimmed down. Everyone relaxed their vigilance. In less than half a minute, all the people on these platforms had returned to their normal state. First, confirm that it's not an energy explosion. The little angel whispered in his mind. The movement just now was not an energy explosion. It was just a normal underwater earthquake, and the scale was quite small. It looked like that on the surface. I'm not sure if it has anything to do with this world. That's right. It's not an energy explosion. Yin Nuashing suddenly rubbed his forehead. His face was slightly gloomy. That was a disturbance of the rules, a disturbance from the inside of the world. It just happened to affect my injury of the rules. The little angel was startled for a moment. After a while, she whispered, "According to them, similar situations have happened many times. And it's not just in this place. Is it similar to what we encountered before? Well, I'm not sure. The conceptual consciousness of this world is wary of me. If possible, don't have any conflict with it for the time being. If it's the same as the ones we saw before, then its consciousness should have been fully formed. If not, then it's just an ordinary conceptual consciousness. But anyway, it should know something." Yin Nuashing muttered to himself. After he recovered, he wanted to get in touch with the chaotic consciousness of this world. However, he hadn't figured out how to get in touch with it so that it wouldn't be hostile to him. If he didn't come to an agreement and it dragged this world to be buried with him, then he would have come in vain. The little angel was speechless when she saw the whole process of him coming up with the idea. She wanted to tell him that not everyone would drag the whole world down with them like him. A newborn child would not have the concept of good and evil. It would only pay attention to what it was paying attention to. In other words, they needed to walk around this stage for a while. First, they needed to find the 2 people who went missing, then find the guy who was suppressed by a lump of seal, and then they would talk about it. Yin Nuashing and the little angel suddenly changed their minds. They looked up at the outside together. Hopefully, there would not be any chaos outside because of the 3 of them. Chapter 1492. At that very moment, On a huge ship outside the village in the sand sea, a large group of people stood on the deck of the 10,000-foot-long behemoth. They were dressed in garments that had a lot of energy reaction. They resembled armor, but were closer to ordinary clothing, and all of their energy came from the energy of the huge ship. Clearly, they could not fire the cannons with their bare hands. They were the controllers of the energy stones that filled the deck, and were using the many complex energy attacks from the lumps of stone to deal with the layers of insects that surrounded them. Apart from the huge objects that they had been fighting for hundreds of thousands of years, there was only endless sand and dust that was kicked up by their attacks. It was almost a desert storm, and nothing could be seen beyond 50 meters. It was either sand or insects. Inside the ship, the captain, who was dressed in ordinary brown clothes and had an air of righteousness and comical brows, was furrowing his brows and loudly commanding the battle. In this atmosphere that was so tense that it gave people a headache, his pair of brows were too funny to look at. Just like the brows of the statue, his face that should have been dignified without being angry was made quite comical by the pair of brows that were raised all the time. Can you hear me? No matter who hears me, please make your cute little ship move back a few steps. I'm going to give your area a big shot. If you don't want to turn into dust with those sandworms, please move back a little. Just as the storm was raging, the captain suddenly heard a voice reverberating in his mind. Raising his head abruptly, he discovered that the people beside him were also clutching their own heads in shock, as if they had encountered something inconceivable. The light and mysterious voice disappeared after it rang out, leaving everyone confused. The only thing that confirmed that it wasn't a hallucination was the panic-stricken faces of the people beside him. What was that sound? The captain's brows were raised as he muttered to himself with a puzzled expression. It was a murmur that appeared directly in his mind, and not through energy stones or any other known means of communication. It left him puzzled and a little wary at the same time. Captain, seeing him suddenly take a few steps back, a crew member who seemed to be of high status suddenly said, "Are you planning to? We can't judge anything, and with the current situation, we don't have the time to pay attention to those strange things." As the captain spoke, he looked out of the window. The sand and the huge creatures were slowly shrinking into the encirclement. Behind them was their city. If they fell, the small village would be destroyed along with them. In such a situation, although they knew that their defense would collapse, they could not take a step back. If they retreated, Captain! The inspection stone suddenly went berserk. An extremely large amount of energy is rapidly approaching. The captain and the crew were stunned. Just as the man's hurried report sounded, they found that the huge arthropods and lumps of things in front of them had all turned their attention to them. A series of strange and frightened cries came out from their huge mouths. The huge encirclement had a flaw in an instant. At the same time, everyone felt that an extremely large amount of destructive energy was rapidly approaching from behind. In a flash, it crossed the small village and appeared in front of them. It was a brilliant and dazzling light of energy. A huge energy torrent swept across the entire battlefield, nearly 100 meters from the side of the encirclement. The rumbling energy tremor made them feel as if the whole world was trembling. Just passing by 100 meters away, without touching anyone, the torrent of energy dissipated into thin air, leaving a scorched mark on the desert that was tens of thousands of meters wide. It looked like a pitch-black canyon, and in the center of the canyon, bright red lava was gushing out. That was probably the melted desert. No one, including the captain, was able to recover from the shock. The beam of light had only brushed past him, but he had already felt an irresistible force. Outside the encirclement, the huge creatures were not directly hit, but they had been shaken to death just by brushing past the beam of light. The black scorched canyon with a red glow had left them speechless. As captain, in front. Someone trembled as he pulled the captain and pointed to the front. Everyone turned around and saw that there should have been a very tall sand dune in front of them. It was still there, but it was rumbling and collapsing. There was a huge hole at the foot of the sand dune, and it was now collapsing violently. The sound of sand hitting the sand would probably be delayed for a few minutes before it could be heard. The second attack is on the way. I was just testing the accuracy. This should hit the bullseye. I hope you have retreated. The light and mysterious voice rang in everyone's mind again, and the lingering sound circled around their brain stem a few times. Everyone felt a chill from head to toe. The captain roared in an instant. Everyone, charge to the rear. Retreat to the edge of the sand city. Take advantage of the time when the sandworms are stunned and get out of here as fast as possible. Damn it. If that inhuman energy hits us, we will be buried under the sea of sand with those big worms. I would rather become the dung of the sandworms than die under that energy. The people who were already prepared to die under the encirclement of the sandworms did not even think for a second before they immediately carried out their captain's order. They turned the bow of the ship in unison. A row of soldiers on the deck also hurriedly aimed the energy stones at the sandworms behind the encirclement. They did not dare to hold back any energy as they directly poured out the energy stones, pressing the sandworms, who were already in a daze, into the desert. The entire fleet hurriedly retreated amidst a commotion. The people in Sand City also hurriedly came to help the fleet retreat. Then, the same thing happened on the battlefield. The human fleets turned around and fled in panic. The army of sandworms dived into the sea of sand in a panic. They flew into the sky and burrowed into the ground, fleeing for their lives. That's right, everyone was running for their lives. No one cared about the situation of the other. They only cared about running. While both sides were fleeing in panic, the guy who just said that the energy was abnormal saw the energy stone next to him suddenly burst into the brightest light with a boom. Then in an instant, the energy stone shattered. His face turned pale. Without waiting for him to remind everyone, the people who were running for their lives immediately looked up at the sky. A silver-white light suddenly fell from the sky and landed in the middle of the fleeing sandworms' army. Then, a loud energy shock wave swept across the sky. A blue and white energy ball slowly rose from the horizon like a sun. No one could understand what this energy was. They only knew that, let alone the worms, a large crater might appear in the desert. The captain had been frightened to the point of numbness. He quickly calmed down and said, "Well, we need to change the route in the future. There are several routes that must pass through there." As for the group of sandworms, they had already turned into ashes under the dim sky. Not even a speck of ash was left. Along with the desert, they had become a thing of the past. Everyone who had returned to the Sand City calmly watched the brilliant fireworks. There were thousands of feelings in their hearts, like a surging river, like a galloping horse. But in the end, only one sentence rushed out from the corner of their mouth. "It's so King Bright." The captain walked to the deck and looked at the gradually dissipating energy fireworks. He could not help but turn his eyes to the back of the Sand City. He thought that the reinforcement might be an extremely powerful fleet. However, when he turned his head, he did not see anything. Just as he was puzzled, he suddenly heard a voice. "Oh, if you look carefully, it's really different from the ships on the sea. These ships can sail on the sand sea, but they probably can't go into the sea." The captain turned around and saw a woman in a black robe with hair as black as ink standing 2 to 3 meters away from him. She was holding a 3 to 4 meter long longbow in her hand. She noticed his line of sight and tilted her head. She smiled and said, "Yo, uncle, you're running pretty fast. I was worried that you guys would be too stubborn to run and get sucked into the storm and die together with me." The captain rubbed his eyes in a daze. At this time, the violent explosion of energy in the distance had swept across the Sand City, accompanied by a huge movement that made the entire desert and the sky roar together. However, the impact was weakened to only a gust of wind that did not have much destructive power. A violent storm swept past and stopped after 10 seconds. When the storm had passed, the captain came back to his senses. He carefully distinguished her voice and found that her voice was exactly the same as the voice that appeared directly in his mind. He trembled fiercely and quickly adjusted his expression. With a trace of etiquette and neither servile nor overbearing, he reached out his hand to Yun Nuashing. "Thank you for your assistance to our soldiers in the city. My name is Gong He. I am the ruler of this sand city." Yun Nuashing chuckled. She waved her hand, and the long bow in her hand disappeared. She shook the other party's broad and powerful hand and said, "Feng Ling, I'm a wanderer passing by. I wanted to rest when I saw that you were besieged by those things, so I cleaned it up." "A wanderer?" The commander-cum-captain was stunned for a moment. He found it hard to believe that there were wanderers in this godforsaken place. However, seeing that she had come alone, there seemed to be nothing wrong with this statement. Ignoring the other party's doubts and confusion, Yun Nuashing withdrew her hand and looked into the distance. She said to herself, "If you have time, can you tell me more about this desert?" He turned his fingers in his mind and grinned. "I experienced some things and forgot a lot of things." Gong He. It was easy for Yun Nuashing to fabricate a story, looking at his life of nearly 100 eras. Oh, divine life, what kind of life had he not experienced? He immediately made up a story about how he originally lived peacefully in Coastal City, but unfortunately encountered a disaster around the world's sea and drifted into the sea and lost his memory. He finally returned to Coastal City with great difficulty, but after a few years, he was once again homeless in the world. In the end, he could only drift in the world without any relatives or friends. Along the way, he realized that he could not do anything other than fill up his power. Well, he himself felt that there were many loopholes in the story, but when he saw the shock and regret on Gong He's face, it was probably enough to fool him. The information obtained from Gong He was somewhat similar to what Yun Nuashing had guessed. The so-called inland was indeed this desert with a harsh environment and overly barren land. 70% of the inland area was desert, and the rest was some more dangerous surging zone. That was a forbidden area for humans, and most of the people who went there never returned. The huge life forms they encountered today were some of the life forms that lurked in the surging zone. They were huge in size and possessed great strength and energy. There were also many other life forms that lived in the desert. Sandworms was a general term for all the dangerous life forms in the desert. If they were to be divided in detail, they could be divided into thousands and tens of thousands of branches. Yun Nuashing felt that he did not need to understand these things, so he skipped this part. Anyway, if they were not worms, they were strange. He did not know what they were, but it did not matter. They could not withstand a single blow from him. The sandworms live in the desert, but they also live by absorbing energy from the surging zone. They use the entire desert as a breeding ground. The closer they are to this surging zone, the more powerful the life forms will be born. It's the opposite if they are far away. That is to say, the surging zone itself will produce a huge amount of energy and pour it into the surrounding environment. The energy will allow the life forms living in the desert to thrive. Yun Nuashing muttered as he twirled his long hair. So far, it was still normal. He did not hear any distortion, abnormality, order, or non-order. But maybe the people living in this world did not have such a concept at all. The level of energy in this world was very low. It posed no threat to them. After all, this was a world created by a newborn consciousness. It was not the self-born source world of the Eight Elements realm. To be honest, he was a little surprised that it could evolve to such a complete state. In many ways, this was indeed a complete world. Even the human race, a large race, could never escape the fate of suffering. It was a miserable fate in every corner of the void before they grew up. This was a relatively normal world. The human race lived normally in the abyss of suffering. The only thing worth rejoicing was that the power of the human race and the strange life forms in this world were basically equal. That was to say, there would not be any major disasters. At most, there would be occasional disturbances. In fact, Yun Nuashing felt that the strange life forms were still a huge threat. Their existence blocked the normal progress of the people in this world. Now, things like energy and materials will be exhausted sooner or later. After all, this world did not have the heart of the world. The strange world in the graveyard of gods and demons also had the heart of the world, but this world did not. It was not destroyed, which meant that there was some kind of force supporting this world and not letting it fall apart. However, the internal exhaustion would continue bit by bit until one day, even the energy was exhausted. It seemed that this world was a bit like a small world, but it was quite similar to the aura of the source world. He did not know if the sea urchin consciousness had mixed up the steps of the creation of the source world and the small world. It built according to the steps of the small world, but in the end, it limited the shell first, and then the things inside became bigger and bigger. When there was a limit, it dismantled and kept dismantling, and then it digressed. What does this have to do with Coastal City? Yin Nuashing tilted his head. I always hear them talking about the inland, but this is the first time I've come here. Gong He stared at him with his eyes wide open and suddenly sighed. I now completely believe that you have forgotten the past. The people of Coastal City and the people of the inland. How should I put it? We are people who live on two different fronts. The people of the inland city resist the threat of the inland city, while Coastal City resists the threat of the world sea. If we want to look at it from a broader perspective, this is our respective responsibility, nothing more. Yin Nuashing's eyes flickered. The inland brought power to Coastal City, and Coastal City provided supplies to the inland. So this was the case. In fact, both sides had their own threats to face, and neither side was easier than the other. Perhaps the threat from the sea of the world was slightly weaker. After all, that was the deep sea, and the threat from the inland came from the big desert under their feet. It was close at hand, as if their fate was being pinched by the back of their neck. Gong He commanded the fleet to rebuild and repair the walls of Sand City. When he saw that Yin Nuashing had finished his contemplation and raised his head, he continued, the contact between the inland and Coastal City is not particularly frequent, but every time we will prepare sufficient supplies before we meet, so you can see them in Sand City. He turned his head, and Yin Nuashing also turned his head. Not far away, there was an artificial fish pond. He seemed to have seen the vigorous seafood in it before. He saw it when he followed the young man to unload the goods on the platform today. Well, it was a little fishy. In general, because of the frequent contact with Coastal City, Sand City, all the inland cities were called Sand City, except for some special named cities. Those very few Sand City with a name, when mentioned, everyone knew where it was not as barren and dry as imagined. Seeing that Yin Nuashing was distracted again, Gong He took the time to communicate with the crew next to him. When he talked about some aspects, he suddenly frowned. He raised his eyebrows and looked a little distressed. He looked up at the ships anchored in the desert and rubbed his head in distress. He couldn't help but mutter, repair the ship, repair the ship, repair the city. Ah, there are no supplies again. It seems that we have to go deeper into the inland. Yin Nuashing, who was daydreaming at the side, twitched her ears. She came back to her senses and said to the little angel with a smile, "See, the plot has been triggered. I just said that we would definitely encounter something unexpected. If we follow the plot, maybe everything will go smoothly." The little angel. This was a case of being forced into a situation. He had already experienced it. He was a walking disaster warning device. When the incident happened, if nothing happened when he barged into other worlds, either the world was going to explode, or the world was still young and could not react in time to the intrusion of such an experienced situation. Hence, he might as well ignore it. Yin Nuashing adjusted her expression and pretended to have just heard Gong He. "Did you just say that you want to go deeper into the inland?" Gong He nodded. "We are going to exchange supplies." "What supplies?" Gong He scratched his chest and thought for a while. Then he took out a purple energy stone from somewhere. Yin Nuashing's eyes flashed. The energy of the energy stone in his hand was very chaotic. It was not like those energy stones that were used for attack, defense, or other purposes. The energy of the latter was very stable. She thought, are these raw stones? Raw stones that have not been processed yet? Sandstone, the raw material of energy stones. Although the names were different, Gong He knew that this guy had lost his memory, so he did not make a fuss about it. He even explained, the energy crystals in the sandworms' bodies are probably condensed in their bodies after they devour the energy in the sea of sand and the surging zone. Good quality sandstone can fetch a sky-high price in some places. It can be exchanged for very powerful energy stones. Yin Nuashing made an O sound. Then, her heart skipped a beat. So this was another race that used war to support war. Using those worms, the energy of the life in the desert to deal with themselves sounded quite interesting. Then, where shall we go? Lanfei City. We are closest to this big city. Did you just say we? As Gong He spoke, he was stunned and did not react for a long time. Yin Nuashing grinned. Yes, I'm hitching a ride. You don't mind, right? I don't have anywhere to go, so I'll go in and take a look. Gong He was stunned. To be honest, on this journey, with such a powerful helper by their side, he should have agreed wholeheartedly. This would save them a lot of people from dying and a lot of trouble. But for some reason, he had a strange feeling in his heart. He felt that bringing this guy along would cause more trouble on the journey. Chapter 1493. In a huge port, or a place like a dock, there were 3 huge ships that were urgently resting in this huge building. The clanking of iron could be heard, and many people could be seen moving a large amount of materials from outside and piling them on the 3 ships. One of the ships was the ship that the captain was personally in charge of. Yin Nuashing only remembered that one ship. Speaking of which, the harbor and shipyard in the desert sea were very different from the ones by the sea or the stars. He did not know if it was because his subjective consciousness was too strong, but he always felt that the ships in the desert sea were very magical. He really did have such a feeling. The huge ships sailing in the desert were as magical as the abyssal death mist derivatives. This was probably the second day of preparations. Yin Nuo had basked in the sun for 2 days and basked in the moonlight for an entire night on the first night. That's right, there was a moon in this world. However, it was not a blue or scarlet moon like the one in Pantheon. Instead, it was a fiery red moon, as if it was wrapped in flames that soared into the sky. The light that it cast was like flames. It would even form a veil of light in the sky of this world. It could be considered a pretty good scenery in other people's worlds. During these 2 days, Sand City was peaceful. There were no sudden attacks from the Sandworm army, no other strange incidents, no collapsing of the sky and earth, and no disturbances in the natural order. His damage to the natural order was almost healed. He also walked around Sand City a few times, but he did not find anything that he was particularly interested in. He also did not see any particularly delicious snacks. No, there was still something. Yes, it was those sandworms. The people of Sand City actually picked them up and roasted them. Looking at those colorful things, Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched violently. Although he would not be poisoned, he still did not dare to compliment those things. However, when he saw others eating so happily, he did not say much. After walking around, he still felt that the dock in a sea of sand was more interesting to him, so he decided to wait here. Gong He had also stayed here for the past 2 days to direct the work of their fleet. Occasionally, when he had a few minutes of free time, he would chat with Yin Nuashing about the sea of sand. He would talk about things that happened in this world to help him recover his memory. Yin Nuashing also knew about most of the things that happened in the sea of sand. In short, it was still the same sentence. The humans in the void were miserable. They were beaten, struck, and cut down. However, they were strong, brave, and stubborn. Even if the sky collapsed, as long as one of them was still standing, they could kick the sky back. There weren't many children of the world in this world. Yin Nuashing felt that it was strange. Currently, he hadn't discovered anything special about this world that was similar to the entanglement of laws, entanglement of fate, or gathering of astronomical phenomena. He didn't know if it was hidden very well, or if this world didn't have such people. After the last batch of goods was loaded onto the ship, Yin Nuashing suddenly felt a special aura. He approached the batch of goods, but it was already sealed in a wooden box. There were even a few energy stones that formed something like a seal to protect it. Gong He saw this and walked over. He looked at the 5-meter-tall box in front of him and revealed a look of understanding. He explained, "That's the most special goods on this trip. Someone in Lanfei City has been collecting this kind of goods, but because it's relatively rare, that person hasn't been able to collect all of it even after 10 years. However, I didn't expect you to be able to sense it directly. You're quite sensitive to energy. Yin Nuashing tilted his head and said concisely, "It's a rather chaotic energy. Clear away the things around it. Don't let other energy sources get too close to it. Who knows what will happen?" "Is that so?" Gong, he was slightly taken aback when he heard this. He scratched his chest and immediately gave the order. Then, he said, "You reminded me of something. I heard that this thing is rather unstable. If it encounters a relatively large object during the transportation process, it might even be damaged. Previously, that person hired a fleet to transport this thing. I heard that it was damaged halfway through the journey. However, that fleet was intact, and only the goods were damaged. It's also because of this that that person hasn't been able to collect all of the goods for so long. After that, there were 2 or 3 similar incidents. They lost money and soldiers, so no one dared to accept this kind of mission again. After that, I didn't hear of anyone bringing this kind of thing. Energy that's too chaotic is an unstable energy source. When it comes into contact with other energy sources, it will cause a situation that you can't control." Yin Nuashing nodded and pointed at the things used to seal it. "Move those things away too. Expand the range of the seal and add a few more layers. Let it stay in a corner by itself. You can stack some things to keep it stable, or you can ignore it. Even if it bumps or knocks, there won't be any problems. However, once something with energy gets close, it won't be a problem for a while, but after a day or 2, it's hard to say." Gong, he nodded in understanding and did as he was told without hesitation. After he finished supervising the scene, Yin Nuashing had already run to the deck to cool off, to bask in the sun. After checking for a while and finding that there were no problems, he also walked to the deck. "Little ones, let's set off for Lan Fei City." Gong, he shouted from the deck. Then he walked to the side of the ship and gestured towards a direction in the city, as if he was giving orders. Yin Nuashing just turned around to take a look when the steel behemoth under his feet started to rumble and shake. The friction between sand and steel caused a thunderous rumble that reverberated below. He watched as this behemoth brought along 2 other ships that were similar in size and slowly sailed out of the port. The soldiers standing on both sides of the ship were fiddling with the energy stones on both sides. There was a movement of energy gathering below the ship, as if some kind of energy attack had entered a state of storing energy. They began to be vigilant of the situation around them. The 3 steel behemoths rushed into the sea of sand. Their speed was much faster than Yin Nuashing imagined. The bow of the ship pushed the sea of sand apart and formed waves of sand. It really looked like a ship sailing on the sea. However, there weren't any huge sand dunes or basins on the sea of sand. In front of them, they encountered a sand dune. A weak feeling of tilting was immediately transmitted to his body. Ordinary people probably wouldn't be able to withstand racing in a sea of sand with uneven terrain. Just as he thought this and was about to stabilize himself, there was a burst of energy movement inside the ship. Then, the entire ship stabilized. It didn't sway left or right, nor did it tilt forward or backward. Even when he saw the bow of a ship tilt up, he didn't feel like his body was tilting at all. Gravity? Yin Nuashing looked at his feet curiously. He didn't expect that there were so many branches of skills in this world. It reminded him of the strange ships of Navira. They seemed to be spinning 3,600 degrees in the starry sky. No matter how hard they spun, the people inside the ship would not feel anything. Well, he couldn't remember. What they were talking about was related to the field of the other world. Although he was a little involved in it, to the extent that he knew about it, he couldn't remember the higher level stuff. When Navira nagged him about the so-called science in his ears, he was dumbfounded, his head was buzzing, and he was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. The specific situation was similar to how Xian and the others felt when he nagged about the rules of the world, the void, and the rules of the void to destroy their worldview. How should I put it? Riding the wind and breaking the waves in the sea of sand is indeed a different feeling. Yin Nuashing fanned himself with his hand. He was holding a large umbrella formed by the power of order in one hand to protect himself from any attack. His other hand was holding a silver-white round fan to fan himself. It's just a little hot. Boom, boom, boom. All right, it's also a little noisy. The rumbling thunder was the sound of the steel behemoth rubbing against the sand. It was like the sound of a ship pushing against the waves. The latter made people feel relaxed, while the former made people feel irritated. Gongi laughed. You may have been wandering between the coastal cities and have never been inland, so you're not used to it. But to us, the sound of a ship pushing against the waves is quite pleasant. Sometimes we can hear the movement of another fleet across the sand dunes. If we're not in a dangerous area, we'll even greet them with a few energy roars. Aren't you afraid of attracting the sandworms? Oh, those things are everywhere. Don't look at how calm the sea of sand is right now. It's normal for them to jump out from under your feet in the next second. We've encountered this kind of thing many times. Gong, he shrugged. He walked to the bow of the ship. Yin Nuashing also followed him. He said, the route to Lan Fei City won't pass through any high-grade energy zones. We'll be using normal equipment. As long as we don't encounter any storms or other things along the way, we won't be in any danger. Yin Nuashing was speechless for a while. Wasn't this bad? When he said this in front of him, this big troublemaker, the situation was already extremely dangerous. There was no guarantee that there would be 3 consecutive troubles on the following journey. First, they would fall into a pit, then be surrounded and annihilated. Then, by a freak combination of factors, they would be thrown into some unknown corner. The final result might be slightly better. After all, with him around, even if the journey was extremely thrilling, in the end, they would still arrive at Lan Fei City safe and sound. The messy thoughts in his mind flashed past for a while. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh of relief. He held his chin and looked at the sea of sand in boredom. His gaze penetrated the distance of tens of thousands of meters and looked at the entire ocean. Although it was called the Sea of Sand, it actually lived up to its name. Not only were there insect-type sandworms, there were also seafood. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call it sand seafood, but as mentioned before, those were all classified as sandworms. Although they did look like fish like octopuses, whales, and giant squid, there were all kinds of seafood in this sea. It was just that they all lived in the sand, which seemed very strange. To be honest, she still hadn't fully adapted to this setting. It took 4 days to travel from Sand City to Lan Fei City. On the way, they had to pass through and cross a surging zone. However, it was said that the energy level of that surging zone wasn't particularly high, and it didn't burst out with energy all the time. There would be a period of calmness, and that was the best time to pass through. Although it's known as a forbidden place for humans, there are still people who insist on going there. Gong, he chuckled and said, the surging zone covers a very wide area. Some spread out like a spider web for thousands of miles, while some spread out like a field. They haven't changed for countless years, and because of that, some people took the risk to approach the surging zone. In the end, they discovered the rules of the surging zone and found a way to go to the other side. Yin Nuashing pondered for a moment. This was no different from repeatedly jumping around the edge of a forbidden place. The only difference was that this wouldn't lead to death. It was just a little dangerous. Once one grasped the rules of the surging zone, there wouldn't be a problem. Then he would have to pray. It sounded like this so-called surging zone had quite an impact on this world. He hoped that his arrival wouldn't affect this so-called surging zone. The next 2 days of travel were peaceful. They encountered a sandworm attack, but the scale was very small, and it didn't reach the scale of the sandworm siege. He didn't even have to do anything, as the crew dealt with the attack. Thus, in these 2 days, he only used his soul to scout the way, occasionally pointing out some places for the fleet to avoid. Along the way, he avoided many things that should have happened. Gong had been traveling this route for many years, and he was the most aware of the few attacks they encountered this time. He didn't think that this was a coincidence, and he linked this to Yin Nuashing. At the same time, he secretly memorized the route, which would save him a lot of trouble in the future. We're here. Look, this is the surging zone. On the morning of the 4th day, they arrived at the most dangerous part of the journey. Gong He and Yin Nuashing stood at the bow of the ship, looking at the scene in front of them. Both of them were observing. One was calculating the time when the energy in the surging zone would dissipate, while the other was observing purely with the eyes of observing something new. It was an area full of solid energy. It looked like a desert that had suddenly changed its color. It was a spacious area of fiery red energy. It looked like a canyon, but there was energy that had condensed into a solid substance flowing across like a long river. The red energy made people feel hot, even from 1,000 meters away. The energy not only surged across the ground, but also spread into the sky. If he wanted to avoid it from the sky, he estimated that he would have to fly to a height of 10,000 meters. It was not a problem for him, but there were not many people in this world who could fly. High altitudes were still a challenge for them. The surging energy is very chaotic and violent. If you fall into it, you'll probably die instantly. Yin Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. He stretched out his hand and squeezed lightly in front of him. A large ball of red energy suddenly surged out from the long river of energy. As it approached rapidly, it collapsed and condensed inwards. An energy ball that was tens of thousands of meters large burst out in front of their eyes, causing Gong He and the others to break out in cold sweat. Just as they were feeling nervous, they saw the ball of energy become smaller and smaller. The strange change made them unable to feel nervous anymore. In the end, they saw the chaotic ball of energy turn into a pearl the size of a thumb and land safely in Yun Nuoxing's hand. Their gazes looked as if they had seen a ghost. Well, the color is not bad. It's just that the energy source isn't too good. Otherwise, the quality would be better. Yun Nuoxing raised the red pearl and aimed it at the sun. The sunlight passed through the pearl and reflected the flame-like patterns very clearly. He took a few glances at it and casually tossed it to Gong He. Here, take it and study it. Don't worry, the energy inside has stabilized. There won't be any explosions or other situations. You can use it without worry. Gong He was stunned when he saw Yun Nuoxing toss it to him. After he caught it, he was shocked. When he heard what Yun Nuoxing said, he heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Yun Nuoxing with a gaze of worship. I've never seen or heard of such a method in my life. Directly extracting the energy from the surging area, Yun Nuoxing twirled a strand of hair around his temples and smiled. If you're not worried, it won't be a problem for you to sail the ship and rush over now. I can protect the ship. Gong He expressed that he completely believed in such a thing. However, after a lifetime of cautiousness, he felt that it was better to be careful. Yin Nuoxing nodded in agreement. It was better to be safe than sorry. He shouldn't blindly do anything just because he had a guarantee. Yes, he was talking about himself. Relying on that thing of his, he ran amok every day. He was not a human being. He was acting recklessly every day. It had already become a conditioned reflex. They stopped 200 meters away from the surging area. At this distance, they could feel the enormous energy coming from the front more clearly. The crew members were on high alert. They checked the ship's facilities and the energy barrier. The captain was constantly comparing the time and observing the surging area. He even ordered the fleet to change their positions a few times. However, they were all 200 meters away from each other and did not cross even 1 meter. When it was about noon, the surging area in front of them suddenly changed. Gong He and the others might have noticed it a little later, but the change in energy was particularly obvious to Yun Nuoxing. He felt that the energy concentration in a position on the left in front of them had suddenly dropped to an extremely low level. There was still energy flow, but it no longer posed a fatal threat to Gong He and the others. Just as he turned his gaze, he saw a crack suddenly appear on the long river on the left in front of them. The crack expanded to both sides, as if the ocean had been split into two. The seawater poured into the crack, but it did not touch the crack. When such an obvious movement was noticed by Gong He and the others, when the crack expanded until it was right in front of them, Gong He immediately gave an order. Set up the barrier. Full speed ahead. As a layer of transparent barrier enveloped the 3 ships, the small fleet rushed forward with a violent roar. This time, their speed was much faster than the previous 3 days. They rushed into the surging area in less than 10 seconds. A violent tremor came from every direction. That was the movement of the surging area's energy coming into contact with the energy barrier. Even if the tide was low, the crack was still surging with a considerable amount of energy. When the fleet was moving at full speed, Yin also took the time to look at the area. At a glance, he understood many things. This so-called surging area was a bit like the dragon vein in the realm of the gods. It was just that it was exposed to the ground and was not bound by any restrictions. So it was directly exposed to the air. His soul followed the surging area and quickly circled the entire inland. It was so complicated that it was like a huge maze. Some surging areas even spread into the sea of the world, a huge energy vein that encompassed the entire world. I think I saw something, a big guy, lurking over there. It's about 2,000 meters away. Oh, it even looked over here. Yin Nuashing pointed to the left. What he said scared Gong He and the people around him so much that their faces turned pale. Gong He was startled. It took him a while to regain his composure. You're probably talking about the controller of this surging area. There are no high-energy sandworms in this surging area. It seems to be because of its existence. Yin Nuashing made no sound. Speaking of which, there should be many huge monsters around the surging area. He only just realized that this place was a little quieter. So it was because of that big guy. Thinking of this, he suddenly had a mischievous idea. His gaze met the big guy's eyes. It looked like a combination of a seahorse and a big arthropod worm. His pitch-black eyes instantly turned dark red. He greeted in a very friendly manner. Yo! Then, the seahorse worm looked as if it had seen the end of the world. It was so scared that all its arthropods shriveled up. It quickly flipped up from the bottom of the surging area and fled into the distance with all its might. Gong He suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He turned around and saw Yun Nuashing's black eyes smiling as she looked in the direction where he said there was a big guy. She seemed to be in a good mood. He couldn't help but feel curious. Did you think of something good? You're suddenly so happy. When Yun Nuashing heard this, she smiled and shook her head. No, I just greeted that big guy. Gong He. But it ran away. Sigh, this is boring. I wanted to tease it. I just greeted it and it ran away. Is it that scary? Yin Nuashing crossed her arms. Her face was filled with boredom and regret. Gong He ran away? Yes, it turned around and ran away. Oh, listen, there's movement. Just as Yin Nuashing nodded, he felt a movement. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. They heard a tremor that sounded like an earth dragon turning over from the left side. It sounded like thousands of sandworms rushing past. Gong He. Could it be that this person was even scarier than the ruler of the surging area? He scared away with just a glare. Chapter 1494. It was a sunny day, swimming freely in the ocean of energy in the surging zone, occasionally flipping over the surface to bask in the sun, stretching, and being free without being disturbed by anything. That was the life of a beast. It spat out a mouthful of energy in the surging zone, and the dozens of ribbon-like limbs on its body swayed. Just as it was about to drift away, it suddenly sensed some movement. It took 5 seconds to think and lazily glanced at the direction where the movement came from. It was those weak beings again. Living in such a large number on this huge continent, they were a little weak. It tried to think about the meaning of their existence, but it felt that it was not as meaningful as sleeping in, so it was too lazy to think about it. In its long life, it often saw those little ones riding those strange white behemoths around the sea of sand. Every once in a while, they would pass by the place where it lived and come back from the other side not long after. Once, they even ran over its head where it was sleeping, but they did not seem to notice its existence. Come to think of it, sometimes when it flipped over the surface of the sea to bask in the sun, it saw the place where they built their nest, which occupied a huge piece of land. It was equivalent to building a house on top of its kingdom. It did not know what the little ones were thinking. Those noisy juniors also liked to torment them, and every time they went there, 2 or 3 of them would come back, and sometimes they would not even come back. It did not know what the little ones were enjoying. It blew out a breath and was too lazy to think about those things. Suddenly, it felt that something was wrong and looked up at the little ones riding the white behemoths and fixed its gaze on a person standing on the edge of the behemoths. He also noticed it after a moment and looked into its eyes. For some reason, that gaze alone made its fifth limb feel numb, as if it sensed that something was wrong. Just as it was about to straighten up and look into the little one's eyes for a while, the little one's eyes suddenly turned dark red. A tyrannical presence that seemed to destroy all things abruptly rushed into its senses, and its huge body was emitting alarms everywhere. Yo! A deep and cold voice quietly rang in its head, and its body violently shrank. It felt as cold as the frozen season in the hot sun, and it felt that if it stayed here any longer, it might quietly die. Suddenly, it did not even care about its nest, spitting out a mouthful of energy and hurriedly fled into the distance. That voice, that gaze, it was too frightening. In one breath, it dashed out a few thousand meters, crossing several regions and knocking over the juniors who were nestled under the sea. It was so frightened that it could not care about anything else. It only felt that the gaze behind it was still following it, as if he could find it no matter where it went, which made it feel cold all over. This feeling only gradually dissipated after it ran for more than 10 minutes. It let out a long sigh of relief, and its limbs that were curled into dozens of balls slowly stretched out. Then it looked at the area that it rarely came to, and after thinking for a while, it swam towards the surface of the sea. It needed to properly bask in the sun to calm its nerves. It still had not completely recovered from the fright it had just experienced. Dozens of limbs drilled out of the sea and rested on the surface of the sea. It used its strength to float up, and its head poked out of the sea. It breathed out a long red breath, and just as it was about to exclaim that the sea air was not bad and was suitable for an afternoon nap, its fifth limb suddenly trembled. Yo, little bug, are you the one who disturbed this great master's afternoon nap? Its entire body trembled, and its huge head fiercely turned around, focusing its gaze on a small person standing on the surface of the sea a few meters in front of it. This small person was wearing white and gold clothes and had a strange round thing on his head that blocked the sun. He was looking at it with a malicious smile, and in the next second, a vast aura as vast as the entire sea burst forth from the small person in front of it. All of its limbs were about to explode. 5 minutes later, he was riding on this strange thing that looked like a seahorse, letting it carry him across the sea of sand. He looked around and scratched the sand tangled in his hair in distress. Phone, where are you? Come and get me. I've been floating in this damn place for 4 or 5 days. I can't sleep well, and I can't eat well. Am I lost? Did I sleep too much? Where am I? Where are these strange things? He shook his head, muttering and sighing. When he woke up, he was already lying in this endless sea of sand. His brain was so bad that it was like a whole void had been poured into it. He was dizzy and heavy, and the injury of the rules had not been completely healed. He could not find phone through soul transmission, and when he wanted to fly out, he was blown away by a few storms. He was too unlucky. It looked at the little guy sitting on its head, who was struggling and sighing about something, and its limbs trembled. It also sighed bitterly in its heart. Well, I guess I won't be able to sleep in the future. Today is really a disaster day. Hey, is there any fun place around here? Hurry up and take me away from this damn place. If you take me to some strange place, I'll drag you out and cut you up piece by piece. Stir-fry one piece, braise the other, and grill the other. Such a big body should be enough to eat for many days. The little guy on its head knocked on its head, and its words drilled into its mind so that it could understand clearly. Although it did not know what the last few words meant, it understood that the little guy was going to eat it. It was so scared that it immediately nodded. Today is a disaster day. If I don't serve this guy well, I might become a meal on the plate of these little creatures. This is too difficult for a beast. I just want to sleep quietly. Why is it so difficult? On the other hand, Yin Nuashing, Gong He, and the others who had left the surge area continued to travel in the sea of sand. Not long after, they saw the vague shadow of a city in front of them. Its scale was much larger than Coastal City and the Sand City they had seen before. If they looked down from above, they could see that there were many fleets coming towards the city from all directions, kicking up sand and dust. The number was not small. Is it the same building as Coastal City's energy center? Yin Nuashing pointed at the tallest building in Lanfei City. He thought that it was normal to have a huge sand sculpture in Sand City, but there were no such tall sculptures in Lanfei City. Instead, there was a grayish-brown building that looked like an obelisk or a tower. The building was divided into two parts, and both parts were huge diamond-shaped stone pillars. In the middle, there was a black sphere that stabilized the two parts of the building a few meters apart. A huge amount of energy came from the building, which was why he thought it was similar to Coastal City's energy center. That's not the energy center. The energy center is only available in Coastal City. Gong He smiled and shook his head. He adjusted the brownish-yellow hat on his head. That's where the energy stones are cast. Just as you thought, the raw materials we brought there are all made into powerful weapons and then brought out. It's a building that only a big city has. Our Sand City doesn't have something of this scale. Even if we make our own energy stones, we won't be able to make powerful weapons because of the lack of technology. Yin Nuashing frowned. This sounded strange, and amidst this strange feeling, he discovered another thing that was even stranger. Those fleets that were rushing to Lanfei City from all directions carried 80% of the same cargo. It was a mysterious, greenish-blue thing that looked like a crystal. It contained a huge amount of energy, and he couldn't see through it for a while. Well, it was not a good idea to unscrupulously peep at other people's belongings. However, he could feel the same aura coming from the blue object all of a sudden, which made him very curious. Most importantly, he could not tell what it was. Since it contained a huge amount of energy, he could only assume that it was also a raw material for energy stones. However, he could not tell the energy inside it. Have you seen this thing before? Yin Oshing leaned in front of Gong He and casually grabbed a palm-sized greenish-blue crystal from a random ship and handed it to Gong He. Gong He was stunned for a moment. This thing was new to him. He carefully held it in his hand. The surface of the greenish-blue crystal wasn't smooth. It was a little bumpy, other than the fact that it was hard enough to make him believe that it was a crystal or a stone-like substance. Its interior had a swaying luster. It seemed to be filled with liquid. I've never seen this thing before. Where did you get it? Gong He carefully returned it to Yin Nuashing and asked in confusion. Yin Nuashing pointed to the distance. From their ship, Yin Nuashing was stared at by his strange gaze for a while. His face couldn't help but heat up a little. He coughed dryly and explained, "No, I'm just curious. After all the fleets from all directions are carrying a huge amount of this kind of goods, and I can't understand it in a short time, so I'm very curious. Do you understand?" Gong He made an "oh" sound, then scratched his head. "You said that all the fleets are carrying this kind of goods. Then it's possible that Lanfei City is collecting this kind of thing in large quantities. But I've never seen this kind of greenish-blue energy stone material. From ancient times until now, there are no records that mention this kind of thing." Yin Nuashing also tilted his head in confusion. He used many methods, but still couldn't analyze this thing clearly. This made him feel even more strange. If he wasn't wrong, this thing might be related to some kind of law or order in this world. And because the existence of this world itself was abnormal, it was difficult for him to analyze anything from it. "Here, this is for you. When you go to exchange for supplies later, ask around for information. I'll walk around Lanfei City and see if I can find any other information." Yin Nuashing threw the greenish-blue crystal to Gong He. The latter hurriedly caught it and nodded. Information flows quickly in Lanfei City. There are actually so many people collecting this kind of energy stone. It shouldn't be difficult to get information. Be careful later. Don't get into any trouble. Yin Nuashing warned. Of course. Gong He chuckled and straightened his clothes and hat. No matter what, he was still the lord of a city, the captain of a ship. He had been to and fro big cities countless times. Although he couldn't show anything in front of this mysterious guy, he wasn't a simple person either. Of course, He could handle these things well, and he wouldn't get into trouble. The scale of Blue Flying City was 6 or 7 times larger than the only sand city he had seen before. The life force inside was also quite dense. A considerable number of human lives lived here. Before he even walked into the city, he could already feel the vitality and atmosphere assaulting his senses. And it was quite noisy. It was as if after staying in the deep mountains and forests of the Pantheon for too long, he suddenly went outside to soak up some worldly air. Before he even walked into the big city, his ears were already ravaged by the countless sounds assaulting his senses. The fleet docked at a huge harbor at the side of Lanfei City. This harbor alone was a quarter of the size of Lanfei City, and this wasn't even including the area of Lanfei City. Standing at the harbor and looking from the side, Yin Nuoxing discovered that the layout of Lanfei City was a bit like an oval sphere. It also looked like a combination of a relatively wide and narrow rhombus and a rectangle. It was shaped like a shield. The sharp end pointed towards the depths of the sea of sand. The layout of Lanfei City is quite deliberate, Yin Nuoxing asked in a low voice. Right now, they were queuing up to dock at the harbor. There were dozens of ships around their size looking for a place to dock. It wouldn't be their turn for a while. Hearing this, Gongyi nodded and also said in a low voice, "The sharp end of Lanfei City is aimed towards the largest surge zone in the Sea of Sand. It's also the place with the greatest threat. It's said that this city's defense can hold out for a very long time, even if it's attacked by 10 surge zone paragons at the same time." Yin Nuoxing scratched his head. The paragons were referring to that thing that looked like a seahorse just now. It seemed to have intelligence and spirituality, but it seemed to be a little timid. It ran away after being glanced at by him. He didn't know what it was afraid of. However, that surge zone paragons, when he glanced in that direction, he did feel a strong life force from that direction. It was probably close to the ceiling of this world. If he went further up, it didn't seem to have any effect. He realized that those so-called paragons didn't want to cause trouble for the human race for no reason. Instead, they were like some lord-level magic beasts that lived deep in the mountains and forests. Their daily interests were to tease their own subordinates, bask in the sun and enjoy the breeze, and live the life of an old idle cloud and wild crane. They looked quite relaxed. Speaking of which, he hadn't rested for a long time. He hadn't rested since 100 million years ago. When would he be able to have a good night's sleep without having to think or care about anything? Before his thoughts ran wild even more, Yin Nuoxing pulled his mind back to reality. He stretched lazily and yawned. The steel behemoth under his feet slowly rumbled, causing his gaze to unconsciously drift towards Lanfei City. It was finally their turn. After queuing for half an hour, he was about to fall asleep standing up. "You go into the city first. We need to be busy here for a while. We need to check and do this and that. You don't have to wait for us. When we're done and gather information, I'll use the communication stone to contact you." Gongyi tossed a black stone to Yin Nuoxing and said. Yin Nuoxing casually caught it and put it in his pocket. He waved his hand and easily walked into Lanfei City. It seemed that there were checks on the fleet, but the standards for the people were not so strict. A few soldiers came up to him and asked him a few questions, and he easily entered the city. However, he said that he wanted to take a stroll, but he did not think about where to go or what to do. His exploration of this world had begun as early as when the damage to the rules was almost healed. That world's consciousness did not pay attention to him anymore. He did not know if it felt a fatal threat from him or if there was something that made it unable to pay attention to him. He was still considered quiet now and did not cause any big movements. Originally, he wanted to directly rush to the concept city to find that consciousness and talk to it face to face. However, his soul went deep into the concept city and did not find any signs of its existence. This caused him to lose his direction for a while. It seemed that he could only slowly wait. Right now, there was another plot that was slowly progressing, so it seemed that he could not rush. As for this world, he still had a lot of interest in this world. Since he was already here, he might as well take it as an emergency break and relax. Well, there was no such thing as relaxing. He was just entangled in another matter that might be even more troublesome. It was just that those matters had not exploded yet. After walking around Lanfei City for 2 to 3 hours, the sun was already directly overhead. Yin Nuoxing felt a wave of sleepiness coming from his bones and almost fell down. It was only when the little angel hurriedly pulled his soul that he woke up. Once I relax, I can't help but want to sleep. And look at the weather. It's noon, and it's the time to be sleepy. If I don't sleep, how can I live up to the weather, right? Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly. You didn't come here to take a vacation. The little angel reminded him in a bad mood, in a situation where the others were not around, and it was inconvenient for her to come out. It was equivalent to no one watching over him. No one tugged at his mind that was always on a rampage, and no one tugged at his mind that was on a mental journey. In fact, she also knew that he had never forgotten those matters in his heart, but the atmosphere here was really too harmonious. She was afraid that if she didn't remind him, he would take root and sprout here. I know. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand. But there are some things that can't be rushed. To be precise, there's no way to rush it now. We can only take one step at a time. After all, we're in someone else's stage. That's true. While the two were talking, the communication stone that Gong He threw to him suddenly lit up, startling Yin Nuoxing. He immediately put away his laziness. Standing in Lanfei City, he identified the direction and immediately ran towards the port. After a while, he returned to the port and found Gong He. You're done so quickly? As soon as he came out, Yin Nuoxing threw this question at Gong He's face. Gong He was shocked by the person who suddenly appeared. After taking a closer look and realizing that it was Yin Nuoxing, he patted his chest and shrugged. It's just an exchange of goods. It's very quick. You can take back as many goods as you bring back. These things haven't changed for tens of thousands of years, unless it's a tense and dangerous situation. Now is not the time for that. Let's not talk about that first. Let's set off first. We'll talk about some things on the way. I'm sure that you'll definitely be interested in that place. Seeing that he had returned, Gong He immediately waved his hand and commanded the fleet to leave the port. They quickly sailed towards a place that was not the direction they came from. Ruins. Yin Nuoxing never thought that there would be so-called ruins in this world. Logically speaking, the yellow sand should have buried everything cleanly, and those insects should have been responsible for turning everything that was buried into feces, leaving behind the ruins. However, to be honest, that wasn't really a ruin. That should be a so-called remnant formed after a huge surging area solidified and cooled. The cyan blue energy stone you obtained from that place was dug out from that remnant. I heard that this thing is called cyan blood of the sand and is a huge energy source. It can also be used as an energy stone, but right now, there aren't many results from this research. Lanfei City and several other cities' big shots are all collecting this cyan blood of the sand. It seems like there isn't just one surging area that's solidified. It might be a surging area with a huge range that's solidified as a whole. That's why you can see fleets from all directions carrying this kind of goods. Yin Nuoxing made no sound. He carefully looked at the cyan energy stone in his hand. He grabbed a strand of hair and twirled it a few times. Cyan blood of the sand? The word blood was enough to make one's imagination run wild. He had thought of something else that wasn't too good. A solidified surging area. It was roughly equivalent to a certain dragon vein in the realm of the gods suddenly solidifying. This wasn't a good sign. Chapter 1495. A huge piece of land suddenly appeared on the barren sandy land. It seemed to be scorched black and dark red from the high temperature. The land extended into the distance, and the protruding ground had a slight curve. The deeper it went, the higher the scorched land became. It was like a huge rock mountain that rose from the ground, but the slope was very gentle. The scorched land was a complete and huge circle, with a radius of about 2,000 miles to 3,000 miles. Yin Nuoxing took a rough look at it. It was a land that was even more barren than the desert under his feet. It lacked vitality and the aura of life. Only the aura of destruction and burning lingered in this place. Gone, he found a safe place to dock the fleet, leaving behind a portion of his men and his adjutant to guard the ship. He brought a few men and took the lead to set foot on this piece of land. With a light step, he felt a wave of heat coming from the bottom of his feet, making him feel a wave of heat in his heart. This huge circular area was originally a surging zone. It was just that it had solidified and mysteriously turned into this state. There are traces of scorching in the air and land. The remaining aura did not dissipate in the air. Instead, it is mysteriously trapped in this land. Yin Nuashing squatted on the ground. His right hand grabbed a handful of soil and rubbed it in his palm. Then he threw it on the ground and raised his eyes to look ahead. This place has truly experienced a fire, and it is completely different from the desert. It is not that this desert has undergone some strange changes, and there is still a considerable amount of heat stored under the ground. If there is something flammable here that can make it burn, there will be a burst of flames that will sweep across the entire land in an instant. Perhaps we can see the scene of flames spewing out from the ground. Fire? Gong, he suddenly felt a little shocked. I heard that this burning land is 4,000 to 5,000 miles wide. What kind of fire can burn this land to such a state? And isn't this a solidified, surging zone? Well, it's hard to say. I will tell you when I have a definite answer. Yin Nuashing pulled a few strands of hair. There were many answers to this question, but she could not tell which one was the real one. The solidified, surging zone did not look like it when she first saw it. This place was indeed related to the surging zone. She saw the wreckage of the surging zone, something similar to the remains of the draconic vein. But the wreckage was less than 1/10 the size of this entire land. She could only say that this burning land was indeed related to the surging zone. But its predecessor should not be the surging zone. It should be something else. She had to think in a different direction. If this was a normal land, it would be difficult to cause such a degree of earth damage in this world. If she used a force 100 times stronger than Gong He's fleet to bombard the land, she could achieve the same level of destruction, blowing up a crater. But if she wanted to set this land ablaze, according to Gong He's intelligence, no one in this world had the power to do so. And there was no trace of life on this land, which ruled out the possibility that this land was once flourishing with life and then destroyed. As for the specifics, she would have to wait and see. Most of the people who set foot on this land are gathered at the front left of that huge rock. I purposely chose a place with fewer people, but there might be fewer things here. Gong He led the way forward and said to Yin Nuashing, "It's okay. If there really is that green blood of the sand, I can find it. The smell of that sand is very easy to remember." What Yin Nuashing said subconsciously, according to his habit, stunned Gong He. The smell of aura? The smell of energy? Does energy even have a taste? He thought for 2 seconds and finally attributed this to Yin Nuashing's unique way of saying that because she was too sensitive to energy. They might not be able to understand this saying, so they ignored it. This land was quite large. The people Gong He sent out to investigate the situation had already gone quite far. He took out a rock and asked, "How's the situation on your side? Did you find anything special?" The rock was silent for 2 seconds before replying, "Captain, I haven't found anything yet. This place is many times more desolate than the sea of sand. No matter what existed before, it has been wiped out. And here, it's a little hot. I feel like I'm walking on fire." Gong He was stunned for a moment. He looked at Yin Nuashing strangely. The latter shrugged and said, "Right? There's still a considerable amount of heat down there. Maybe there are still flames that haven't burned out completely. You could try throwing some useless and easily flammable things on the ground. Maybe you'll see a circle of flames within 100 meters. Gong He thought for a moment and felt that the scene would definitely be very exciting. It would definitely be very good to watch. It would definitely be like playing with fire. So he decided to forget about it. They came here in a hurry without any preparations. The energy stones they used to defend against attacks could only defend against energy and physical attacks like this. They might not be able to withstand it. Yin Nuashing's soul had already spread out across this land. It was desolate, lonely, and its shape was a little strange. It looked like a huge bun. Except for the lack of wrinkles, This land was so desolate that it seemed like no life had ever been born here. No life had ever visited this place. It was strange. The number of life forms in this sea of sand was no less than a real sea. From the signs of sandworm armies gathering every few days to fight to the death with humans, they should be a rather large group. Why was this land, which was better than a desert, not welcomed by them? He felt that there was a problem. This was very problematic. Captain, we found a piece of green blood of the sand, but it's probably just a fragment. It's only about the size of a finger. A report suddenly came from the communication stone. Yin Nuashing and Gong, he turned their attention. Gong, he thought for a moment and replied, "Did it grow from the ground? Or was it just left by the side of the road? Half of it is buried in the ground. We dug a hole about 2 to 3 meters deep here, but we didn't find any more green blood of the sand. Fill up the hole and move on. We might take another path. If we encounter danger, we have to protect ourselves." Gong, he put the communication stone aside and shook his head at Yin Nuashing. "Looks like we didn't find anything." Yin Nuashing's eyes flashed. He said, "I didn't find anything at the moment. I did find traces of green blood of the sand, but they are very small and buried 1 to 200 meters underground." When he heard that they found the green blood of the sand, Gong, he was excited. But when he heard the last 2 sentences, he was instantly stunned. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. It's not realistic to dig a hole 200 meters deep. Let's move on. There was another situation that Yin Nuashing didn't mention. Even if he did, Gong, he wouldn't understand. He could only communicate with the little angel. It wasn't just 200 meters deep. There were also traces of green blood of the sand in deeper or shallower places. There were some places where there was a weak energy reaction, but it was already very weak. The things there might have disappeared for a while. Disappeared, not dug away. There were no traces of man-made or insect destruction in those places. In other words, the so-called green blood of the sand disappeared into the ground on its own. It was as if it was absorbed by the earth itself, or as if it dissipated into pure energy and disappeared on its own. Yin Nuashing took out the green blood of the sand that he stole from someone and looked at it. There was no reaction. There were no signs of dissipating or dissolving in the earth. He tried to break off a piece and then threw on the ground. Gong, he, and the others were stunned when they saw his action. They took a few steps back and paid close attention to the movement of the piece that was thrown on the ground. However, there was no reaction at all. "It seems that I was thinking too much." Yin Nuashing smiled at everyone. Just as he was about to pick it up, a young man with sharp eyes and agile hands ran over to help him pick it up. However, just as he bent down and before he could touch the piece of green blood of the sand, the piece suddenly disappeared. With more than 10 pairs of eyes staring at him, the young man was also stunned. He looked at Gong He and Yin Nuashing in panic. "Captain, no, it's none of your business." Yin Nuashing waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to panic. He saw it very clearly just now, but the others probably couldn't see it. The green blood of the sand disappeared into thin air. "This is your perspective. I saw it suddenly collapse into a cloud of mist and then directly drilled into below." The young man heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that and quickly ran back to the team. Gong, he scratched his chest and muttered, "This earth will eat the green blood of the sand? This place produces the green blood of the sand, but this place will also automatically recycle it. Is that what you mean?" Yin Nuashing shook his head. "That energy seems to be drawn down. There's probably something down there that is absorbing the energy of the green blood of the sand." The diligent young man's face turned pale when he heard that. Could it be the sandworms? Gong's face twitched too. Yin Nuashing shook his head again. What he said made them feel very relieved. No, there are no traces of sandworms coming or existing on this piece of burning earth. Even if it was all surging areas before, even if there were a large number of sandworms at that time, they have all moved away now. Gong, he also heaved a sigh of relief. He was wondering why there were no corpses of both parties if there were really sandworms here. Could it be that they were eaten? Yin Nuashing looked left and right, then suddenly waved her hand to change their path. "Let's go this way. If I'm not wrong, there should be an opening here that leads downwards." If we go underground, we might find out what happened. Gong He thought for a moment and nodded. He used the communication stone to instruct the crew members who went to explore other places to be careful. Then, he followed Yin Nuoshing in another direction. The crew members who came along were a little scared, but they looked more excited. Looking down from the desert, this was a piece of land with an indistinct arc. But now that they were here, it was as though they were standing in a wilderness covered in scorch marks. There were no mountains, no other traces, and no arc. It was as though they were walking on another piece of land. As their group gradually went deeper, Gong He and the rest finally felt the obvious change in temperature. As they went deeper, the embers under their feet turned into a bonfire. Gong He believed without a doubt that if they went deeper, they would feel the same as if they were in a field of fire. While Yin Nuoshing was searching for the passageway to the bottom, one of Gong He's crew members found a corpse on the ground. It was the corpse of a human. That crew member's scream attracted everyone's attention. Even Yin Nuoshing turned to look. He didn't feel anything, but when he saw Gong He's frown, there seemed to be something else. What? Is it someone you know? Gong He looked at Yin Nuoshing and shook his head with a bitter smile. No, the people I know are all in Sand City. I'm just a little surprised. This guy was killed by an energy stone attack. There's no one here to collect his body. I just didn't expect something like this to happen in a place like this. We actually encountered it. Yin Nuoshing revealed a look of realization. It was another guy who had the unrealistic idea of the world being beautiful and everyone living in peace. Now that he found out that someone had died in the dark corner of the fight, he couldn't help but sigh. However, there was nothing they could do. Yin Nuoshing looked away. Once upon a time, a long time ago, he also thought that in a world where everyone could barely guarantee that they would not be killed by a common threat, people should be quite harmonious with each other. Everyone should help each other and work hard to survive tomorrow. But in fact, in a world like this, the evil buried deep in people's hearts would be exposed more thoroughly than people living in a peaceful world. The situation in the spirit-gathering continent was abnormal. This was a more normal world. He was used to it and was numb to it, so he did not feel anything. At this moment, he was still focused on looking for the crypt that led to the underground. If he could not find it later, he might knock open a passage himself. All right, I found the way. Don't sigh about those things. Yin Nuoshing said to Gong He, there's a saying in my hometown, when you sigh about a certain difficult situation a certain number of times, you will also fall into that situation. It's a mysterious saying, but a few of the words are just a metaphor. Gong He was stunned for a moment. He scratched his chest. What am I sighing about? Yin Nuoshing was also stunned. He stopped in his tracks. And the thing you sighed about just now was, oh, this. Gong He turned his body sideways and pointed at a small grave that appeared on the ground out of nowhere. He sighed, this guy has nothing on him. He got lucky. Usually, when we help to collect corpses, we will take away a small part of the things. Sigh, I always feel like I lost out. Yin Nuoshing, this uncle, the mentality you expressed before and after your words seemed to be different. Huh? Yin Nuoshing turned his head away with a face full of black lines. He allowed a long sigh of relief. He should just focus on leading the way. He kept feeling that his right shoulder was a little heavy. The passage leading to the underground was located at the bottom of a small basin. It looked like a cave under a cliff. The cliff was a little short, only 4 to 5 meters high. The cave occupied a part of the ground and the cliff. It was about 4 to 5 meters in diameter. It would not be crowded even if 5 to 6 people walked side by side. As for the inside, the hot air was even more intense. The wind blowing against their faces felt like it had passed through a raging fire. They could feel that the air was dry, even from 5 meters away. It was as if a group of volcanoes nearby had erupted together. Yin Nuoshing reached out and knocked on the wall, gesturing that there was no problem. He then took 2 steps forward. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. Wait a minute. If you can't stand the heat, don't go in. The temperature down there is much hotter than the desert. The children of the desert are not afraid of the heat. Don't worry. We won't even frown, even if the temperature is twice as hot. Gong He suddenly put his hands on his hips and said proudly, Yin Nuashin glanced at them and realized that they were not even sweating. He ignored them and took the lead to walk into the cave that was half on the ground. The first few dozen meters was a long and steep slope. Yin Nuashing felt that it was a little strange. This passage seemed to have been formed by something flowing through it, such as water or magma. But if it were these two, it would not have left behind such a crooked passage. But it was hard to say. After crossing a few vertical cracks, they slid along the wall that was almost completely vertical on the ground. They fell tens of meters into the ground. The road ahead was slightly less steep. However, the number of potholes and cracks that suddenly appeared increased. Everyone looked down the cracks curiously. They could not see anything as the light could not reach that far. One of the crew members threw out an illuminating energy stone out of curiosity. Everyone watched as the circular light illuminated the rock wall and fell down rapidly along the crack. When it hit the protruding spikes of the rock wall, it rolled and collided with the opposite side of the rock wall and bounced off the wall. The light also swayed along with it. In the end, the energy stone fell to the bottom. The limited light of 5 meters was not enough to illuminate anything. Don't throw things around if you have nothing to do. Energy stones are expensive. Gong, he slapped the crew member's head and lectured him. They crossed the cracks on the ground one by one and continued to walk for a while. The road ahead started to become strange. They suddenly had to climb up and jump into pits. In this dark place, even with the illumination of the energy stone, they could not see anything beyond 5 meters. Moreover, the cave was filled with gravel and pits. Everyone was frightened as they walked. One step was steady and the other was crooked. If they were not careful, they would sprain their feet. Yun Nuashing could see clearly and avoid them completely, but the people behind her, they were now walking with their backs bent. Their faces were covered in sweat, not because of the heat, but because of the difficult road. They were almost lying on the ground and touching the road as they walked. There is a huge energy reaction in front. There's a considerable amount of energy gathering in front. Be careful. Yin Nuashing suddenly reminded them. Gong, he was nervous at first, but then he relaxed slightly. A huge energy gathering area. Could it be the core area of the surging zone wreckage? Well, it's not completely impossible. But no matter what area it is, there might be a huge amount of green blood of the sand inside. I smell a very strong scent. Yin Nuashing narrowed her eyes and said. The diligent young man suddenly took a deep breath. The movement was so loud that even Yin Nuashing was stunned. When she turned around, she saw him breathing in the dust in the cave. He immediately coughed violently. The group could not help but laugh. After a while, he asked with his red nose and eyes in confusion, "Why can't I smell anything?" Yin Nuashing laughed dryly. It was rare to see such an honest young man these days. Our senses are different. I have a special way to determine it. I can recognize it, but you can't. Well, that's what I mean. After walking for about half an hour, the tunnel in front of them suddenly opened up. Suddenly, a huge light came from the corner of the dark cave. Everyone looked at each other and stepped forward a little. After crossing the last distance, they all turned their heads in unison. Then they all took a deep breath. What appeared in front of them was a magnificent field of energy crystals. Well, that's it. That was all they could see at first glance. If they had to describe it in detail, the space in front of him was a huge underground cavern. The walls of the cavern, from top to bottom, were all cyan blue. The entire underground cavern was a huge piece of cyan blood made of sand. There were stalactites and crystal clusters hanging from the top of the cavern. They were 10-meter-long cyan energy crystals. Countless energy radiances were flickering in this huge underground cavern. It was as if some kind of light was running in this cavern by itself. However, this kind of color wasn't particularly beautiful. Instead, it was a bit muddy. The energy crystals that were supposed to be very beautiful became, because of this muddy light, it gave him an indescribable bad feeling. Oh! Bowman and the others were dazzled. They had never seen a more gorgeous scene. Such a scene was already too gorgeous in their eyes. The light that filled the entire cavern, the beautiful blue light, At this moment, countless images suddenly appeared in their minds. Mountains of energy stones, more powerful weapons, more powerful fleets, a brighter future, and so on. Then the same voice echoed in their minds, "Oh, this is all money," while they actually said it out loud. Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment. He could not help but smile bitterly. Damn it, he felt something else. Thanks to them gathering together, he could clearly feel something. The little angel sensed the change in his mood and added, "Oh, this is the taste of the plot." Yin Nuashing. He almost broke his silence. Chapter 1496. In the huge crystal cave, the cyan light with a heavy aura settled in the bright cave. The cyan energy crystals that fell from the ceiling shattered on the ground and slowly melted into the crystal layer below. A moment later, they turned into protruding stones and condensed on the ground. The cyan sand blood outside seemed to turn into gas and condense again here. Just as Gong He said, this was the core of the cyan sand blood. Yin Nuashing was the first to walk into the crystallized land. Gong He and the rest followed behind him at a distance of 5 meters. The group of people's footsteps were very clear, as if they were walking on some kind of fragile gemstones. Every time they stomped on the ground, they could even see the ground flashing with light. The group looked around at the beautiful scene. Their vision was occupied by the cyan light shining from all directions. They could barely see the road under their feet. The diligent young man ran to a 2-meter-tall crystal pillar under the signal of his companions. He gritted his teeth and hugged the crystal pillar with all his might. The energy crystal that seemed to be firmly embedded in the ground creaked under the young man's strange strength. The edge of the crystal began to crack. Yin Nuashing heard the sound and turned around to take a look. He did not stop them. However, when he turned around, he suddenly had a different feeling. He began to walk backwards into the depths. From a new perspective, he felt that this huge underground cave had a different smell. It was like, what was it again? When he reached the center of the cave, Yin Nuashing suddenly realized that the entire huge crystal cave was a bit like a huge eggshell. He was standing in the middle of the eggshell and observing the inside of the eggshell. Based on this conjecture, the so-called cyan sand blood might be the blood of the creature in this eggshell. But it was just a random thought. There was no breath of life here. There was no life that he defined as life here. They were the first group of people to set foot here. He suddenly stopped. What if the creature got rid of all its breath of life? It cannot be helped. The word blood gave him a very strong feeling. It made him think that he was standing in someone else's hotbed, inside someone else's eggshell. From a human's perspective, he might be standing in someone else's mother's womb. The more he thought about it, the stranger it felt. Why do I feel like this is the nest of a huge creature? What does the inside of an eggshell look like? Gong He suddenly spoke. The crew members who were collecting the green blood of the sand were stunned when they heard this. They looked around carefully and shuddered violently. Then they quickly nodded. Yin Nuashing could not help but smile bitterly. It seemed that he was not the only one who had this kind of intuition. Everyone who came here had this kind of feeling. Could this really be some kind of gigantic creature, like the nest of a sandworm that we've never seen before? Gong He whispered to Yin Nuashing. For now, I haven't found any signs of life here. So, there's a 70% chance that our guesses are wrong. The other 30% is that the creature is too good at hiding. Even I can't find it. Yin Nuashing said with a shrug. His personal feeling was more inclined towards another kind, which was the kind he had thought at the beginning. The so-called green sand blood might be something similar to the wreckage of a drained dragon vein and some kind of mutated power of law. Moreover, seeing the green sand blood gathered here, the degree of accuracy of this guess in his heart soared by several levels. The only thing he was not sure about was that he did not understand this so-called surging area. It was not like the dragon vein, where the wreckage would leave behind a huge crystal body similar to a dragon core. It was filled with the purest energy. Looking at the crew members collecting the cyan sand blood as if they were digging bamboo shoots, Yin Nuashing's cheeks trembled. We still have to climb up later. Don't carry too much weight. It's okay. Gong He smiled and waved his hand. He shook a blue energy stone. There was a little brown in the center of the energy stone. We have a lot of space stones with us. We'll stop when they're full. We won't collapse this place. Yin Nuoxing noticed that when the crew members were collecting the cyan sand blood with the space stones, the brown in the center of the stone would spread a little. It was probably a sign that the space inside the stone was being used. When he saw the space stones, he was a little confused. The power of this world was too strange. Flying was still a problem for them, but these people had already mastered part of the power of space. Using the power of space to store objects was much harder than using the power of space to smash people. Logically speaking, with their talent in this area, it should not be difficult for them to fly. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuoxing felt that it was useless to think about this topic. He shook his head and turned his attention away. He placed his hand on a crystal pillar that was more than 10 meters above the ground. He used the pillar's energy to sense the entire underground cavern. Then he was slightly stunned. There was a weak energy resonance in this underground cavern caused by a huge amount of energy. This feeling seemed to come from deeper underground. The resonance in the cavern they were in was just child's play compared to the other energy resonances. In other words, there was an even larger amount of cyan sand blood in the depths of the underground cavern. The energy resonance spread throughout the entire underground cavern. The resonance of energy caused the ground to vibrate in a regular manner. It was very slight and difficult to detect. There was also a response from deeper underground. If he guessed correctly, a considerable part of the underground cavern should belong to this burning earth. Moreover, the entire earth was in the shape of a sphere. As soon as this sphere idea appeared, it made him think of many things. Many unreliable ideas surged into his mind. At this moment, he was trying his best to put them aside so that he would not wander into another void. The weak energy resonance was not very strong. It could not even be considered as an itch. No, correction, it was nothing to him. However, for Gong He and the other life forms in this world, it was not good for them to be immersed in this kind of energy resonance environment for a long time. Now that he was here, the rules and order automatically repelled the influence of the energy field here on them. Don't come to this place next time, Yin Nuoxing said softly. Gong He and the others were stunned. He scratched his chest in confusion and asked why. Yin Nuoxing squatted down and pressed her hand on the ground. She explained softly, the amount of green sand blood in this cavern is unusually large. Their energy is resonating with itself. For ordinary people, if they stay in this kind of energy resonance environment for more than a certain period of time, their bodies will produce an unusually strong rejection reaction. First, you will feel that your body is a little out of your control. Then, you will realize that your thoughts will slow down, your body will become heavy, and your body's functions will weaken rapidly. Your entire body will become weak. Then your internal organs will be assimilated into these crystals bit by bit in this energy. Finally, your entire body will turn into these crystals bit by bit from the inside out, or it will directly rot away, leaving nothing behind. The slightly serious explanation made everyone's faces turn pale. When they saw the green sand blood in their hands, their faces turned even paler. They hurriedly shook their hands and threw them all away. They even had the thought of retreating in their hearts. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand to calm everyone down and said, "It won't be so serious for a while. Moreover, such a reaction will only occur when such a large amount of green sand blood gathers together and resonates. You can still collect at ease for now. When the time is almost up, I will inform you. Set aside about an hour to start retreating." However, this underground cavern was really empty. Forget about the fact that it was formed by the green sand blood. Most of the internal volume was empty. It was no wonder that everyone felt that it was like the inside of a huge egg. There was only one entrance to this cavern. At present, she had not found a passage to go deeper. She did not know if they had to break through the wall to continue going deeper. Yin Nuoxing casually broke off a thumb-sized piece of green sand blood and threw it into her mouth. She swallowed it without chewing. Bah, it's disgusting. There's so many ways to identify the energy. Why do you want to swallow it in one bite? It's faster this way. Yin Nuoxing licked his lips. The unpleasant taste lingered in his mouth and made him feel a little uncomfortable. It was as if he had eaten inferior herbs mixed with mud and mud. If it were someone else, they would have found a place to squat down. The mixed power of the rules is not particularly large. And what is this? Yin Nuoxing frowned. The energy in her body began to surge. Little bits of light gathered from all corners of her body to her throat. Then, she opened her mouth and spat it into her palm. It was an oval, blood-red crystal only 2 centimeters tall. There was a very bright light in the center of the crystal. It looked like an eyeball. Can you not be so disgusting? The little angel felt nauseous. Oh, she did not have a stomach. Anyway, she felt a little disgusted. So what is this thing? It's a condensation of non-order energy. It's not a crystal. The energy inside has been completely silent. It can't be called an energy crystal. Yin Nuoxing looked at it and threw it into his mouth. The little angel opened her mouth and made a retching gesture. She quickly covered her eyes with her jade-like hands. She could not stand it anymore. Although they were all pure energy life forms, she still felt a little disgusted. She ate it and spat it out, then ate it again. What kind of operation was this? It's a little like the energy of the abyssal death mist. No, it should be the abyssal death mist. This non-order energy is almost exactly the same, but seems to be distorted. Yin Nuoxing analyzed the energy condensation. The result that he subconsciously said stunned himself. Distorted? The abyssal death mist is distorted? The expression on the little angel's face turned serious. Are you sure you're not mistaken? After 100 million years of battle and research, they had come to an unchanging conclusion. The abyssal death mist could be destroyed, devoured, and purified. Diluted, it could be turned into a cloud. Concentrated, it could be turned into a viscous liquid. But there was no way to make it change. Just like Yin Nuoxing's element of annihilation, it might have its own form, or it might not have a definite form. But it would not be distorted into another form by other forces. Yin Nuoxing carefully sensed for a while. She nodded and said in a firm tone, "My result is correct. The green blood of the sand is slowly distorting the abyssal death mist, making it inert and harmless." Hearing this, the little angel suddenly thought of something else. Didn't you just say that there are several holes formed by the green blood of the sand in this burning land? When they gather together, they will resonate. The energy of the resonance will affect the surrounding scene. Could it be that it is purifying this burning land, and this land itself is actually the condensation of the abyssal death mist? This statement gave Yin Nuoxing a shock. Damn, this is really possible. I just compared it. The aura of the distorted abyss death mist that was just extracted and the aura of the burning earth is 20% similar. Maybe the burning earth is a more perfect situation. The little angel followed this train of thought and said, so the green blood of the sand is almost invisible in the outer layer of the land. Because the purification has been completed, the green blood of the sand will return to this place and continue to purify the deep land. Yin Nuoxing frowned. It is completely possible, and I can't find a way to refute it at the moment. He carefully looked down at the appearance of the entire burning land. He could see through the entire land that was enveloped by the desert from the outside. Then, he was stunned for a moment. He quickly looked for Gong He. Have you heard of the saying that the cloud lantern at night is red? Cloud lantern was the name of the moon in this world. They were still used to calling it the moon, but in this world, it had another name. It was better to be clear with the people of this world. Gong He was slightly stunned. His eyes showed that he was thinking and recalling. This strange saying seems to be a saying from 1,000 years ago. I heard that the cloud lantern at that time was red. But now, the cloud lantern at night looks like a strange scene of raging flames. If it wasn't for the dim light, we might have thought it was the second sun. 1,000 years ago, Yin Nuoxing whispered as he twirled his hair. He saw the little angel looking at him curiously in his soul. He explained, This burning land is a sphere with a radius of 2 to 3,000 miles, a celestial body that should be hanging in the sky. No one knows why it fell to the ground. Maybe it was because of the abyss death fog, so it wasn't crushed into pieces and turned into a star ring. Instead, it fell to the ground in one piece. It didn't even break apart. Then it might have crashed into a surging area 1,000 years ago. In the end, all the energy in that surging area drilled into this celestial body. It took 1,000 years to turn it into this celestial body. Was there a large-scale war 1,000 years ago? Yin Nuoxing immediately regretted asking Gong He this question. Based on how backward the transmission of information in this world was, even if an apocalyptic war had really been discovered 1,000 years ago, it probably would not have been passed down. Yes, it happened 1,000 years ago. If there was a particularly large-scale war, it could only be that war called the War of the Fallen Moon. Gong He immediately answered. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. There really was such a war, and it was called the War of the Fallen Moon. Could it be that the celestial body under their feet was the moon that was destroyed 1,000 years ago? What was the exact situation? Oh, that's hard to say. Gong He smiled bitterly. The beginning and end of that war were abnormally chaotic. It was so chaotic that it couldn't be investigated. It wasn't even sorted out specifically. I only heard that the war ended with a huge object called moon being destroyed. It was said that it was the cloud lantern that we can see at night. Its predecessor was called moon. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. As Gong He spoke, he tried to recall what he could use as a topic of conversation. Seeing his reaction, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. You can't be serious, right? That must be a lie. Let me tell you, although the cloud lantern is hanging in the sky, it's actually very, very far away from us. Even if we drove a boat straight to the cloud lantern, it would take 1 or 2 years to reach it. The furthest attack that we can use with our most powerful energy stones is not even 1/10,000th of this distance. How can we possibly destroy the cloud lantern? It's all nonsense. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. He really wanted to tell Gong He that it might not be nonsense, because what they were stepping on might be the moon from 1,000 years ago. However, considering that it would be very complicated and there would be many problems to explain, and considering that he was a little lazy and didn't want to waste too much saliva, he didn't say it out loud. Let's not talk about the mysterious battle of the fallen moon from 1,000 years ago, and let's not talk about how the people at that time were crazy enough to destroy the moon. However, according to Gong He, it was almost the same as killing a pest. It was a good thing, so he didn't mention that either. He was more concerned about how to get down there. After resonating with the green blood of the sand for a while, he felt that there was something strange in an area below. The strange feeling was mixed with the aura that he hated the most in his life. It was also mixed with the aura of life that would not be good if something like this happened. There was something down there, and it was being scanned by a few large green blood of the sand gathering area. He was very curious. As the saying went, curiosity could make a god kill a group of mortals, so Yin Nuoxing's mind was filled with strange thoughts. He looked back at Gong He and said, I might have found a way to go deeper. The energy resonance situation below may be more serious. However, you have 2 hours. If you start retreating after 2 hours, you still have time. Do you still want to continue going forward? If it's not long, then let's go. Before Gong He could finish his sentence, Yin Nuoxing walked forward on his own. Gong He was stunned. He quickly waved his hand and signaled everyone to follow him. They continued to go deeper into the underground cavern. The deeper they went, the larger and thicker the green blood of the sand became. The size of the cavern was really beyond their imagination. The deeper they went, the green-blue energy crystals could be used as mirrors. Yin Nuoxing found the entrance to the underground cavern. He slapped a 2-meter-thick pillar away. After digging for a while, a 3-meter-wide pit appeared on the ground. He took a look inside and then jumped in. He disappeared in an instant. Wow, that's a slippery. Seeing Yin Nuoxing's figure disappear with a swoosh, leaving only a scream with an echo, Gong He and the others hurried over nervously. After a long time, they finally heard the word p at the end echoing in their ears. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Come down. There's no problem, but you have to be mentally prepared before you come down. When Gong He and the rest heard the sound, they quickly jumped down the slope. The group of people quickly slid through the dark space. When their line of sight found the light source, just as they were about to see the space clearly, they saw Yun Nuoxing's body emitting light, illuminating the underground space. However, it was fine if he did not illuminate the area. There seemed to be green blood of the sand in front of them. How is it? Is there anything special? Gong He moved closer to Yun Nuoxing and looked around vigilantly. In front, Yun Nuoxing pointed forward. Gong He took a few steps forward. Suddenly, he was stunned. He heard some unpleasant sounds. It was the sound of some kind of carapace, arthropod, and some kind of hard object rubbing against each other. It made his teeth itch and goosebumps appear all over his body. Could that sound be? It's that M.O. Fei. Yin Nuoxing nodded calmly. And it's an enhanced version. It's probably 7 to 8 times stronger than the ones you've dealt with before. Bottom line, that's just the bottom line. The Sandworm Army. Although they were small in size, each of them had a weak reaction from the Abyss Death Mist. Compared to the sandworms Gong He and the others had dealt with before, these sandworms in front of them were probably comparable to the sandworms living in the surging area. After listening to Yin Nuoxing's calm explanation, Gong He thought for a while and decided to faint. Curiosity can't kill a god, but it can kill a group of mortals who follow him, the little angel said calmly. Chapter 1497. Looking at those big worms up close, there was an inexplicable sense of oppression. It was probably because even the smallest sandworm was 3 to 4 meters tall. It was very normal for them to be afraid of creatures that were larger than them, especially those that were still living under the constraints of the rules. This was even more normal. In the dim tunnel, there was only a blue light coming from the front. A crunching sound that made one's ears and teeth itch echoed in their ears. It was like the sound of something rubbing against something else, sharp teeth scraping against bone, blunt knives cutting rotten wood. Looking through the blue light, they saw a large army of strange-looking bugs and unknown creatures. Although they were all called sandworms, Yin Nuoxing was used to classifying them according to his understanding. If he really wanted to talk about bugs, only 1/3 of the creatures in front of him were in the shape of bugs, and the remaining 2/3 were all grotesquely shaped things. Those big bugs were squeezed inside the underground cavern made by the green blood of the sand. Their huge bodies collided and rubbed against each other, and there was not even an empty space to be found. A large number of sandworms were even squeezing and pushing upwards. Although they were only 3 to 7 meters tall, the wall of sandworms that appeared in front of them was about 20 to 30 meters high. There were 4 to 5 layers stacked up from top to bottom. If the nest made by the green blood of the sand was not hard enough, the army of sandworms would have poured out like a flood. Oh, my ancestors! Gong He looked at the scene in front of him, and his face turned green. Although his face was green, and he felt a little nauseous, and his legs were weak, he forced himself to continue to observe the situation in front of him. They seemed to be doing something in there. They seemed to be destroying something. Destroying something? Yin Nuoxing raised his eyebrows. He was going to ignore this place and continue to move on to the other green blood of the sand caverns. But Gong He's observation with his experience made him a little interested. Do sandworms have any destructive tendencies? Like they like to destroy something? That's hard to say. In the desert, if we don't kill them, they kill us. The things they are tearing apart will only hinder them from building their nests. For example, our buildings and our sand cities. There are a few sand cities that block the paths of some tribes during their seasons. Every year, there will be 1 or 2 large-scale attacks, said Gong He. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed. The things they were destroying and removing were not their things. After being stimulated by the weak death mist of the abyss, if they still had thoughts, they would have entered a state of madness. Their desire to destroy and vent their power would be magnified countless times. Forget it. Anyway, there should be something in there. He was suddenly a little interested. Let's stretch our limbs and get ready to go in. Yin Nuoxing said softly. The energy on his body began to surge, turning into circles of barriers that enveloped Gong, He, and the others. This energy can protect you from being attacked. It's indestructible. So, don't worry about it and fight. These two sentences scared Gong, He, and the others so much that their faces turned pale. However, the existence of the energy barrier did give them a little sense of security. They tried to use normal attacks and found that they couldn't even leave a mark on the energy barrier. The sense of security increased by a lot. Then, they began to prepare their own energy stones and weapons. This time, they didn't have the help of the ship. They could only rely on their own means and strength. When Yun Nuoxing saw that they were ready, he took the lead and rushed towards the blue wall. A magic circle appeared in front of his arm. As he punched the wall, a power that was like a comet colliding with the moon suddenly erupted. The blue wall and the thousands of sandworms were blown away. The power of the magic circle suddenly erupted and formed a storm, blowing the army of sandworms that was supposed to pour down into the hole. At the same time, the power of the magic circle also blew a large group of sandworms to death. The sound of the energy explosion reverberated through the ground like thunder. The energy explosion instantly added several colors to the blue hole. The deafening hisses of the sandworms were accompanied by the sound of the energy colliding and destroying. The sandworms, who had their brains fried, were still dizzy and had yet to react. Meanwhile, Yin Nuoxing had already torn a huge crack 100 meters wide in the army of sandworms, almost reaching the other end of the underground hole. Gong He and the rest were stunned. Gong He and the rest looked at the weapons in their hands. Gong He and the rest dashed into the 100-meter wide crack. The army of sandworms ran past them, ignoring their existence. "Captain, do we really have to fight?" The diligent young man said straightforwardly. His face was filled with shock and fear. His power is enough to rival the strongest fleet. Everyone hurriedly nodded. The earth-shattering scene in front of them was too frightening. When immortals fought, mortals retreated. If they were to get involved, even if they had an energy barrier, they would probably be knocked out of their minds by any of the forces inside. Gong He turned around and glared at them. Then he grabbed his energy stone weapon and followed behind Yin Nuoxing. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside, 3 layers above and 3 layers below. The sandworms formed a wall in front of them. Yun Nuoxing had yet to see what was in the center of their encirclement. She only vaguely sensed another aura belonging to order. However, she still needed to move a little before she could get there. Just then, the sandworms regained their senses. After losing nearly 1/10 of their power, they finally recalled their brains that were fried by the power of the death mist. They finally discovered Yun Nuoxing's existence. Then, in the next second, the army of sandworms, insects, fish, and plants that blotted out the sky and covered the earth charged fearlessly at the tiny human. Then, in an instant, they were blasted into the wall opposite the underground cave by a completely unreasonable force. Because the space was narrow and the geology here was quite fragile, Yin Nuoxing did not use a powerful energy attack. He was afraid that a large-scale energy attack would blast all the insects here, along with the land and the things they surrounded and destroyed, and then everyone on the ground and underground would be crushed to death by this heavy land, or they would be crushed to death by its energy first. Sometimes, if the power is too strong, it will be troublesome to deal with small things. Yin Nuoxing complained to the little angel in her heart. She could not help but sigh. It was like digging a hole to plant a tree. Others would dig a hole about a foot deep, but she had blasted a hole big enough to stuff a planet into. The standard of this power did not match the standard. She was making a mountain out of a molehill. A lot of crackling sounds, accompanied by bursts of powerful energy bombardments and explosions, echoed in the underground cave. The broken bones and remains of the sandworm army slammed against the wall, fell on their own sandworms, and smashed against the ceiling. A mass of flesh and blood with a mysterious purple liquid stuck to the ground and twitched. Yin Nuoxing was so focused on killing that he did not notice these disgusting things. But Gong He and the others who were helping to clean up some of the enemies behind saw it clearly. Their faces were as green as a grassland. In the past, when they dealt with these enemies, they were on the ship. The more powerful energy attacks, the more they would turn the sandworms into ashes. Basically, they would not leave these broken limbs and flesh behind. Now that they saw these things up close, it was quite vomiting. A few of the young men could not stand it and began to retch. This had nothing to do with courage at all. It was just too disgusting. It's just like the sandworm quagmire. Looking at the scene in front of him, Gong He could not help but say, God knows how many sandworms are like the swamp and the forest, squeezing towards them like a living quagmire. Their huge bodies rode the waves of sand and rolled towards them layer by layer. He could not see many of those bug-like things. Those that could be called worms were almost all dead. The remaining ones were some weird creatures in the sea of sand. Fathead fish with 7 heads, sea snakes with tentacles like an octopus, and various other mutated mystical creatures. Their attacks would smash a lot of sand. Due to the large number of sandworms, there were already a few small sand dunes here. Gong He could not help but wonder if these things ate the sand and spit it out now. The abyssal death shroud spawns were brainless energy life forms, and those that were tainted by the abyssal death shroud's power would not have a good brain. Depending on the degree of the abyssal death shroud's corruption, they would either lose the ability to think altogether. What Yinuashing wanted to say was that he was already very familiar with these things. All of them were charging at him without regard for their own lives. They did not fear death, did not know fear, and did not know how to think. Unlike the army he faced outside Sand City a few days ago, where he only needed 2 blasts of energy to wipe them out, these sandworms that had been tainted by the abyssal death shroud's power and were in the process of evolving in the prison of the green blood of the sand did not know fear. They charged at him in a suicidal manner, like waves crashing at him. I'm going to throw up everything I ate a few days ago. Little Angel used his perspective to look at this hellish scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere. Her pretty face turned pale and green. Fortunately, she was an energy life form and did not have a stomach. However, for her to be able to look at this scene that made her extremely uncomfortable, she was also very masochistic. This is troublesome. Yin Nuashing let out a long breath. Energy gathered in his hand to form a 10-meter-long white greatsword. He raised the greatsword and slashed it forward. Boom! It was unknown what level of energy had struck the ground, causing an earthquake of unknown magnitude. In any case, when Gong He and the others saw the greatsword, they were already stunned. They were too stunned to react. At this moment, the ground undulated like the surface of the sea. The earth's crust undulated up and down as if they were surfing on the waves. The group of people were jolted 4 to 5 meters into the air by the tremor. The group of people were waving their arms and legs in the air as they screamed in fear. When they landed on the ground, it was the thin layer of energy barrier that supported them, preventing them from falling to the ground. However, the sandworms didn't have the same treatment. Just from the energy tremor just now, a large portion of them had disappeared. The explosion of energy in front of the greatsword had created a fan-shaped crack that stretched from 10 to 100 feet wide. Everything in front of them had disappeared completely. The sandworms that were jolted to the ground were now twitching. They were all about to die from the heavy blow. I hate things like numbers the most. No matter how many come, they will all die. It's basically useless except to disgust the enemy mentally. Yin Nuashing waved the greatsword in his hand and turned it back into energy and dissipated. He looked at the sandworm army that was lying on the ground and could not stand up again and yawned. As he spoke, he thought of the abyssal death mist. That thing was definitely an exception. Behind the huge number of sandworms was an even more disgusting swarm that used the real void as its energy source. The huge number of sandworms was so huge that they could easily destroy the entire 8 Elements realm. Gong He patted his aching butt and stood up. He wiped the weapon in his hand that looked like a combination of a sword, a spear, and a trident. As he walked towards Yin Nuashing, he asked, "Are you done? These sandworms, they can't stand up." The energy of the sand green blood is purifying them. They have lost all their strength. Yin Nuashing said as he stretched out his foot and kicked a 4 to 5 meter long sandworm beside his foot. The sandworm wriggled on the ground and showed no signs of standing up. After cleaning up the underground cavern, Yin Nuashing walked towards the place where the sandworm army had first surrounded. At this moment, there were only 2 or 3 miles left of the dozens of miles of journey as they sprinted all the way. After everyone packed up, they easily arrived there. Then the thing that the sandworm army had surrounded appeared in front of them. To be precise, they had already noticed this huge thing before, but now they could see it clearly at a close distance. It was a huge blue pillar that connected the upper and lower ends of the underground cave. It was probably more than 1,000 meters tall. Near the 2 ends, the pillar turned into a whirlpool that connected the 2 ends of the ground. The surging energy made the whirlpool look like it was rotating. The pillar was like a very exquisite energy sculpture. For some reason, Gong He and the others felt that the thing looked very familiar, making them feel very relaxed. Even though there was a pile of sandworms that could not move lying around them, they still relaxed in an instant. Yin Nuashing noticed Gong He and the others' relaxation and could not help but look at the pillar. The pillar was about 2 feet in diameter. Its size was not very big in this huge cave. He only saw it clearly halfway through the fight. It contained an unusually rich power of the natural order. It was the power of the natural order of this world. That was why Gong He and the others relaxed when they saw it. It was a power and aura that originated from the same source, just like how the native life forms of the celestial realm behaved and relaxed in front of Hui. As for its original form, it should still be the sand green blood. This is the core of the prison that imprisoned the death mist in the abyss. Yin Nuashing walked forward and stood at the bottom of the whirlpool. He reached out and touched the huge sand green blood. His eyes flashed. This core was really similar to the situation of the dragon vein in the celestial realm. It contained pure energy that contained part of the natural order. It was condensed and limited according to special rules. Similarly, there was a core at the center. Yin Nuashing waved his hand at Gong He and the others, indicating that they did not need to come up. Then he pretended that he could not fly and jumped 1 to 200 meters high. He stuck close to the pillar and moved towards the center of it. However, this scene made Gong He and the others feel even more horrified. This thing has been attacked by sandworms. Look, there are many marks left on it. The soft voice of the little angel rang in Yin Nuashing's mind, causing him to turn his gaze. The middle section of the pillar was no longer as smooth and flat as before. Instead, it was full of bumps and bumps. There were some shallow marks that were 2 to 3 meters wide. If one were to zoom in and see the marks deeper, one would think that it was a huge bite mark. However, these marks were not visible at the bottom. The reason why the sandworms gathered here was not just because they were squeezing together. They were trying to attack the middle section of the pillar, where the core of the green blood of the sand was located. Wow, it's too horrible to look at. The little angel could not help but exclaim when she saw that the number of bumpy marks, bite marks, and scratches on the pillar increased as they got closer to the center. I don't know how long they have been gnawing on it, but they still haven't smashed this place. It seems that the sand green blood has a certain suppressive effect on them. Yin Nuashing asked curiously. If the strength of those sandworms was converted, it was enough to slowly smash Gong He and the others' fleet into pieces. Moreover, the fleet was stronger than the pure energy stone, like the sand green blood. However, the sandworms could not kill the sand green blood. It was unknown whether it was because of the suppressive effect or because the sand green blood suppressed their own strength while suppressing the power of the abyss death mist. Yin Nuashing stopped near the center. He casually reached out his hand and smashed a hole in the pillar in front of him. He reached his hands into it and searched for a while. Then, he took out a green energy crystal that was about 1 foot long. It was not regular and could be considered a sphere of pure green energy. While he was examining it, the little angel suddenly said, "This thing smells a little familiar. It smells a little like Yuan Kong and me. This thing is of the same race as you?" Yin Nuashing was shocked. The little angel rolled her eyes at him and shook her head. It's just that the aura on this thing is a little similar to ours. I think the one who created this thing is very likely. Nuashing nodded. The one who created this thing was basically the chaotic consciousness of this world. He did not know if it had taken shape or not. Thinking of this, his expression suddenly became very strange. The consciousness of this world was fighting against the abyss death mist. At least, that was what he saw at the moment. This core, this green blood of the sand, had a weak suppressive and distorting effect on the abyss death mist. These huge underground caverns were actually cages and energy sources. They existed to purify the abyss death mist. This was very interesting. So far, the abyss death mist creatures created by the underworld. Number 1, the little angel, was abducted by him. Number 2, Yuan Kong, felt that they were up to no good and sneaked away. Then, he followed the senses of the same race to find the little angel. Now, this guy, who was probably number 3, whose consciousness was probably still in a state of confusion, had already started to fight against the abyss death mist. Well, all these things created by these guys did not like them. This sounded very exciting. A family was bound to have internal strife. When the door was closed, the whole family would be annihilated. As the saying goes, do not do things more than 3 times. How could the underworld be so unlucky? If it was not for the fact that the world of order was in an absolute disadvantage, he would have sympathized with them. However, this did not constitute a reason for them to recklessly look for it. A strange and dangerous thing that suddenly broke into someone else's home, even if it was a consciousness of the world, would still have a vigilant mentality. Saying that the abyss death mist and the underworld are the common enemy obviously did not make it trust them, even if they had just killed the sandworms with the power of the abyss death mist right under its nose. However, this thing has the power to suppress and distort the abyss death mist. Yin Nuashing looked down at the core of the green blood of the sand in her hand. Her eyes flashed. She looked up at the sky and said to herself, I'll borrow it for a while. I'll return it to you when the time comes. Don't worry, the trash has been cleaned up. Maybe it's just as you said. Something good might happen when something unexpected happens. Maybe we can really find the key to turning the tide of this war. Yin Nuashing sighed to the little angel. Hearing that, the little angel curled her lips. That's because you forced the plot to happen. It has nothing to do with me. Yin Nuashing was speechless. This brat is not going to let go of the words force the plot, is she? Chapter 1498. Boom! This was the umpteenth time. Yin Nuashing expressed that he was not very clear why every turn of events had to be marked by a loud noise. Perhaps this was the will of heaven. Perhaps this matter had been forced to the point where it could cause a huge physical sensation wherever he went. Perhaps it was because he had gained a strange talent. Other than himself, Gong He and the others, the only ones who could cause such a huge commotion in this huge underground cavern were the sandworms that came from who knows where. He could still hear the screams of Gong He and the others. However, Yin Nuashing was not in a hurry. Even if he did not rescue them for a while, they would be fine. After all, the energy barrier could withstand the impact of the world's explosion. Well, it was just a small energy barrier. He did not feel anything wrong with it at all. With this thought in mind, Yin Nuashing calmed down. He slowly processed the core of the green blood of the sand in front of him. He wrapped it with the power of order and stabilized it bit by bit. If he rashly moved the core away before he finished processing it, its energy would slowly dissipate. When the energy dissipated to a certain extent, it would... Boom! Why was there a noise again? Suddenly, Yin Nuashing felt something touching his back. He thought it was Gong He and the others. Without turning his head, he said, all right, stop howling. You won't die anyway. Hold on a little longer. I'll come and help you after I'm done with this thing. At first, the little angel did not feel anything was wrong. He was also focused on stabilizing the core bit by bit with his energy. Then about 5 to 6 seconds later, both of them were stunned. That's not right. The sound came from so far away, and Gong He and the others don't seem to know how to fly. The two people looked at each other. Then, Yin Nuoxing turned around and was stunned. A strange black creature that looked like a long snake with an ugly coxcomb on its head. The coxcomb had dozens of tentacles that looked like seaweed. It also had a big chin and a pair of 10-meter-long golden red eyes narrowed slightly. The man and the snake stared at each other. "TSK, evildoer, take my sword." Yin Nuoxing reflexively drew out the Netherworld Ruin sword. Since he was still in a state of shock, he used a little more energy. By the time the snake reacted, he had already swung his sword. Buzz! The long snake was scared out of its wits by his sudden sword strike. The antennae on the coxcomb on its head all stood up, and its huge body suddenly burst out with a brilliant and dazzling light, causing Yin Nuoxing to be shocked. That power, that aura was... The sudden burst of light caused Yin Nuoxing's movements to slow down for a moment. Taking advantage of the moment when he was caught off guard and slowed down, the huge monster snake quickly turned around and entered the brilliant light it emitted. Its huge body disappeared without a trace in an instant. Yin Nuoxing was stunned once again. "What's going on?" Yin Nuoxing stared blankly at her surroundings with the Nethervoid sword in her hand. The little angel sat up straight in the spiritual world. Her pretty face was solemn. "That's the power of divine right, the power of the rules. And it's the power of divine right that's similar to your aura." Yin Nuoxing added for her and waved the Nethervoid sword to dissipate it. "I overreacted just now. Did you feel it? It doesn't have the aura of the abyssal death mist on it. It seems to be quite normal. It has normal intelligence and spirituality. I clearly felt the emotion of shock from it just now." The little angel nodded. "It's probably similar to the seahorse-like creature you saw in the surging area. But it suddenly appeared here, touched you, and ran away. What's it trying to do?" Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. How would she know? She thought that Gong He and the others had come up. After thinking for a long time, she remembered that the people in this world could not fly yet. Furthermore, she clearly heard the screams of the group of people coming from afar. Why would they suddenly appear behind her? That's right. Once she focused on her work, her mind would not be able to pay attention to other things. She could not blame her. She really could not blame her. You're not like this when you're fighting. Why didn't you say that when you're looking in 8 directions, listening in 4 directions, and grasping an entire realm? The little angel exposed her in her soul. Yin Nuoxing stuck out her tongue guiltily. She simply ignored the girl's question. After dealing with the core of the green sand blood, she hurriedly descended from the underground cavern and landed heavily on the ground. When she appeared in front of Gong He and the others again, the battle here had become white-hot. Gong He and the others realized that the crazy sandworms could not break through their barrier. Every one of them seemed to be on steroids. However, they were not stupid enough to clash head-on with those 7 to 8 meter tall creatures. Gong He was commanding the battle. Some of them were focused on defense, while the others were focused on attacking. However, Yin Nuoxing noticed an exception. There was a rash young man who had been charging at the army of sandworms without fear of death. Often, before he could charge at the sandworms, he would be sent flying by a whip, a limb, or a head. He would flop on the ground for a while before he would charge at the sandworms again. He was simply courting death by relying on his immortality. The little angel's voice was full of surprise. "Why do I see your shadow in him? Can your energy barrier affect other people's personalities?" Yin Nuoxing, "Girl, what did I do to you? Why are you making things difficult for me today? It's quite fun to see you so depressed that you can't speak." Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and calmly walked over. Halfway through, she suddenly noticed that there were many holes 1 to 2 meters wide on the ground. The shapes of the holes were a little strange, and there were cracks on the edges of the holes. It was as if something heavy had suddenly smashed into the ground made of the green sand blood. Bang! One of the crew members shouted and charged. Then, he was flung away by a giant sandworm's tentacle. He rolled 5 or 6 meters in front of Yin Nuoxing like a gourd. Just as he was about to help, the giant tail of the sandworm slammed heavily on the ground and smashed the crew member into the ground, creating an irregular human-shaped hole in the ground. In fact, it was because the energy barrier was too hard that the crew member was smashed into the ground. If the crew members were physically strong, they would have been turned into minced meat by now. In the blink of an eye, the crew member jumped out of the cave with a heroic posture. Then, with a huge energy stone weapon in his hand, he charged at the sandworm that had sent him flying. With a big slash, a trident stabbed into the sandworm's body, cutting a huge hole. Before he could expand the effect of the battle, he was once again slapped into the ground. After a few seconds, he bravely rushed out again. Yin Nuoxing. Okay, she knew what was going on with the hole that looked like a whack-a-mole. There was a huge hole in the wall of the underground cave, and the endless new worms were burrowing in through that hole. Yin Nuoxing roughly used his spirit to take a look, and his cheeks trembled slightly. There were quite a lot of worms inside, and it wouldn't be a problem to fill this space again. More importantly, the abyssal death mist on their bodies reacted even more strongly, and their bodies were brimming with surging and chaotic energy. They had launched countless attacks at Gong He and the others, and if it weren't for the unreasonable energy barrier around them, they would have been drowned by the sea of sandworms. However, with that barrier, they even killed more than 100 giant sandworms with their own strength, and the corpses of those worms were still quite intact, unlike the ones he had just dealt with, which were already dead and scattered all over the ground. Visually, it was easy to deal a psychological blow to the people on his side. You guys are fighting quite intensely. Yin Nuoxing walked to Gong He and the others. He could not help but complain when he saw the situation in front of him. Even if Gong He and the others were tired from fighting and their legs hurt from defending, they would not be killed even if they just stood there and let the worms gnaw on them. At most, they would be eaten into their stomachs and then, come out with feces. Oh, you're back. How's the situation? Gong He looked quite excited. He had never tried such a simple and direct close-range attack before. Relying on the fact that the big guys would not die, he was exerting his strength as if his life depended on it. Looking at his excited expression, he seemed to be a little excited. Aha! Fighting worms at such a close distance is really exciting. It's not like the past where we could only sit on the ship and fire cannons. Look at this close distance, the impact, the flesh and blood flying. TSK, TSK, TSK. That's right. Without the barrier, you might not be able to take it. Yin Nuoxing. These people must have activated some strange innate talent. In the future, they would all turn into berserkers and jump off the ship to fight with sandworms. If that happened, he would be the main culprit. Cough, cough. It's time to leave. Tell your people to retreat. Yin Nuoxing coughed softly. Dark, red energy gathered in his hand. The strange light dimmed the light in the underground cave. Sandworm, Gong He, and the others were shocked. With a snap of his fingers, the dark red energy turned into a ring of energy and suddenly exploded, sweeping in all directions. Gong He and the others stared at this scene with wide eyes. They imagined that the sky would fall, the earth would dry up, the rocks would crumble, and the world would collapse. However, the surroundings were so calm that it was as if nothing had happened. He only noticed that the energy barrier on his body seemed to have inadvertently fluctuated. He did not know if it was an illusion. Why didn't anything happen? The diligent young man lowered his head and mumbled. He stood up and grabbed his weapon. Just as he was about to do something, he suddenly saw some ashes floating in the air. It looked like the ashes left behind by something burned in a high-temperature flame. He suddenly saw Gong He and the others staring at him. The atmosphere was strange. He swallowed his saliva and quickly looked forward. The sandworms that were showing off earlier, and even the dead or half-dead sandworms that were lying on the ground, suddenly turned into ashes. They flew into the air with dark red and golden light, disappearing into the air bit by bit. They were completely disintegrated into nothingness. They looked like they were burned to death, but there was no trace of the high temperature of the fire. All of this happened naturally in such a normal and strange way. It was like a dream. Those sandworms were just illusory existences that were constructed in the dream. As the dream woke up, they disappeared bit by bit. Let's go, let's go. Have you finished collecting? If not, You won't be able to come here again in the future. It's not safe to come here without me. Moreover, it doesn't seem like there aren't any sandworms here, as I said. Yin Nuoxing's voice brought Gong, He, and the others back to their senses. Then, the space before them became abnormally empty. Those sandworms had all turned into ashes. Nothing was left. The unknown always made people feel fearful. However, it seemed to only be a weak case. After gathering the team, on the way back, Gong He and the others were obviously quieter. Occasionally, they would even say a few words or make jokes to ease the boredom of climbing in this dark and boundless underground cave. However, compared to when they first arrived, they all seemed to have a lot on their minds. It was as if they were doubting everything they saw today. Phew, we're finally out. It's dark underground. If we can't see the sun, we'll feel like we're buried underground and will never be reincarnated. The diligent young man was so excited that he whistled when he saw the sun. He stretched and said, Gong, he shook his head. Just as he was confirming the route, he heard the sound of rocks cracking. When he turned around, he saw that the not-so-tall cliff had suddenly turned into rolling rocks and fell into the cave, blocking the path. Seal the path to prevent anyone from going in. There are still sandworms below. They're sandworms that are being dealt with by green blood of the sand. They're much stronger than the ones you encountered. Seal this place to prevent anyone from accidentally releasing the sandworms, Yin Nuoxing said to Gong He. That should be the case. We don't want to go to that place a second time. Gong He nodded. His pair of strange eyebrows were slightly raised. He found a way back. Suddenly, his expression froze. He looked at the horizon with slight astonishment. His eyebrows that had just been raised suddenly continued to be raised. However, his expression became slightly gloomier. What's wrong? What happened? Yin Nuoxing, who was leading the way at the front, suddenly felt a low pressure behind her. She turned around and saw that Gong He's expression had suddenly changed. He even raised his eyebrows and looked like he was deep in thought. For a moment, she was very curious. There's a small problem with the ship. Gong He waved his hand and led the others forward quickly. I don't know where they came from. The fleet has surrounded this area and detained everyone who came here. They're not allowing anyone to leave. I don't know what they're trying to do. A force? Which city's people have such courage? Yin Nuoxing slightly raised her spirits. She thought that there would be a good show to watch. However, in the next second, she suddenly thought of her own troublesome personality and was stunned again. This shouldn't have anything to do with her, right? It's not like she was really the god of troublesome personality in the void plane. How could so many things have anything to do with her, right? Gong He did not see Yin Nuoxing's changing expression. He only focused on speaking. There are many sand cities that can do this. First, there are those with names. Second, there are some sand cities that are only second to those cities. Most of the people who come here are just some scouts or small gathering teams. There is a circle of ships with millions of levels of vitality surrounding one direction. That's right, only one direction. The other places were completely undefended. They did not seem to care about the defenses of the other places. Yin Nuoxing was confused by the loopholes in the lockdown circle. Why are they only surrounding one place? They have already set up the lockdown formation. It's impossible that they can't even set up the lockdown circle, right? Gong He was stunned for a moment. It took him a moment to remember that this guy had lost his memory. He nodded and began to explain. That's because there is no need to defend the other places at all. That place is the radiation zone of some dangerous surges. There are very powerful sandworms lurking in those areas. Even the fleets of the famous cities are not willing to go to those places. Oh, so that means they're holding fate by the throat, right? Yin Nuoxing raised an eyebrow and smiled evilly. If I ask you to go to those dangerous places, will you be able to return? Let's not talk about those weird theories for now. Just tell me, if I ask you to treat that place as flat ground, will you be able to drive the ships back? Gong He was a little stunned, but he still answered honestly, Oh, that's not a problem. The reason why the surges are dangerous is because of the sandworms and the energy of the surges. Without these two conditions, the sea of sand is just a sea of sand. It's no different from any other place. But no buts. Listen to me. Yin Nuashing suddenly put his left hand on his waist, and his right hand pointed at the place directly behind them. Come, charge bravely into the surges of the sea of sand like a suicide squad. He carefully thought about the risks and dangers he would encounter along the way. Just thinking about it caused the alarm in his mind to buzz and explode. It was like the thunderous sound of millions of ships sailing on the sea of sand. Gongyi rolled his eyes and felt that he was going to faint again. Chapter 1499. Two huge fleets faced each other silently in this strange sea of sand. One side was an unknown force that had sealed off this sea of sand, while the other side was a large group of onlookers who were involved in construction in the burning land for no reason and were inexplicably called out. The distance between the two sides was only a few hundred miles. The tense atmosphere spread to every inch of the sealed area, along with rings of surging energy. Gongyi and the others chose to send their most sincere greetings to the group of people who had inexplicably issued a blockade order and declared war on them. Then, they turned their ships around and dove into the surging area. Looking at the red land that looked like it had been burned to ashes, Gongyi had a feeling that things were going to become more and more bizarre and troublesome. He was stunned when this feeling appeared, but when he thought about it carefully, he could not find it. A moment later, Gongyi suddenly remembered that he had this feeling when he came out with Yin Nuashing. This was only the second time it had appeared. We're about to trigger the blockade order. Everyone, prepare to resist the impact. Gather energy from all energy stones and send it forward. Don't be so nervous. Just drive straight over. There's no need to attack. When Gongyi was giving orders, Yin Nuashing suddenly spoke. His words stunned everyone. They looked at each other, not knowing whether to listen to their captain or to this mysterious and powerful expert. Gongyi glanced at Yin Nuashing and saw him smiling nonchalantly. He waved his hand and said, "Everyone accelerate. Transfer all energy to the energy stones. Crash head-on." A huge amount of energy flowed to the heart, causing the three ships to roar violently. The silver-white hull seemed to be covered with a layer of gray. After a few seconds of delay, the three ships suddenly entered a state of super acceleration. The sudden violent reaction caused everyone to stagger slightly. They hurriedly adjusted their condition and looked straight ahead. The pale red energy wall was rapidly crashing into them, causing everyone's hearts to tighten. They swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared straight ahead. Distance: 400 meters, 200 meters. Collision is imminent. It was unknown which bastard reported the distance, but made the already tense people's hearts beat faster. Layers of cold sweat appeared on their foreheads, and they subconsciously activated the energy barrier of the energy stones, waiting for the moment of violent collision to arrive. Closing their eyes and waiting, everyone gritted their teeth and turned their faces away, imagining the scene of the ship being destroyed. But all they could hear was the rumble of the kinetic stones bursting with energy, as well as the rolling thunder of the ship rubbing against the sea of sand. It was as if nothing had happened. Puzzled, everyone opened their eyes, expecting to see a pale red wall before them. But there was only an endless sea of sand, dunes, and basins as they braved the wind and waves as they rapidly sailed across the sea of sand. He turned his gaze behind him. The light red wall was gradually shrinking in his line of sight. His fleet was not stained with the light red energy tracking mark, which made him very curious. He looked for Yin Nuashing and asked, "How did you do it?" Are you talking about that sealing circle?" Yin Nuashing waved her hand nonchalantly. "It's just nullifying their energy. What's so hard about that?" Everyone was speechless. No, they found it very difficult. They had left the sealing circle unscathed, and there was no energy tracking mark on them. But he did not feel relief at all. The road ahead was one of the most dangerous zones in the sea of sand, and they had to take a detour to return to their own sand city. To be honest, even with the mysterious and outrageous person beside him as protection, he did not feel relaxed at all. It was different from the surging zones they had crossed before. Those places could be quickly traversed with some pattern, but that alone had taken the discoverer a great deal of effort. Now, they were heading to a forbidden zone in the sea of sand that not many dared to set foot in. It might be the birthplace of many legends and rumors, and once they set foot in it, well, the person beside him did not feel nervous at all, even though Gong he had emphasized it many times. It's fine. Don't worry. That was the only thing he said. Gong he could not help but smile bitterly. He did not have much of a choice. From a moment, he chose to head to the other side of the sealing circle. The only path left for him was to listen to Yun Nuoshing's arrangements. In this damned place, if he simply walked around with his shallow and negligible experience, he would only die faster. Captain, the communication stone received a message. It seems to have been received not long ago, but the situation just now was urgent, and we did not notice it. The diligent lad ran to the two of them with a fist-sized energy stone and handed the communication stone to Gong He. Gong He was slightly taken aback. The message in the communication stone seemed to have been sent by the group of people who used the sealing circle. Their purpose was similar to Yun Nuoshing's and his own guess. They had their eyes on the green sand blood collected by everyone in this area. Other than that, there was something else that was more noteworthy. An energy stone with a strange energy, the green sand blood's core. Yun Nuoshing's heart skipped a beat. She had an expression that said, F*CK, are they talking about me? Why does it have to do with me again? The only thing that could be considered a core and could make them use the term strange energy was probably the thing that he had obtained. But it was very strange. It was fine that he had obtained this thing, but how did those people outside know about its existence? No other life forms had set foot in that place before. There was no trace of life left behind by anyone who had been there. Furthermore, there were a large number of sandworms that had been infected by the abyss death mist. How could ordinary people go there? Things seemed to be developing in a strange direction uncontrollably. Strange. Ignore them. Who knows what they are talking about? Gong He threw the communication stone to the young man. He turned his head and saw Yun Nuoshing humming a song. She seemed to be quite happy. Gong He let out a sigh of relief and said, "What do you think the core they are talking about is?" It might be some kind of gigantified carrier that has the concentrated energy of the green sand blood. Yun Nuoshing twirled her fingers. She was half serious and half joking. It's like compressing a huge green sand blood that was as big as the earth into the size of a palm. There are many changes inside. It's not as simple as it looks on the surface. This thing might be called a core. But who knows if what I said is the same as what they said? Let's not talk about this first. Are you sure you can find the way home now? Yun Nuoshing changed the topic. I can feel that the energy concentration in the surroundings is slowly increasing. It shouldn't affect some of the functions of your energy stones, right? That shouldn't be a problem. Even if the energy stones don't work, we can still use this to make a judgment. Gong He smiled and pointed at his brain. After sailing on the sand sea for a lifetime, there are always some things that I won't remember wrongly. Once we cross the sand sea in front of us and come into contact with the danger zone, we will change direction and go around the furthest detection range of those people. After that, we will head straight for Sand City. However, we might have to pass by the edge of the surging zone on the way. There is no way to avoid those places. Gong He frowned when he mentioned the surging zone. Yun Nuoshing shrugged indifferently and comforted him. That's not a problem. As long as you can find the way, it will be fine. Bang! Yun Nuoshing and the others who were chatting in the wind suddenly felt the ground shake violently. The steel ground of the entire ship was shaking. Gong He's expression changed slightly. He quickly ordered, "We have broken into the territory of the sandworms. Quickly investigate the level of the sandworms under the sand sea. Everyone, prepare for battle." Yun Nuoshing had already seen the situation below while they were dealing with the emergency situation. Now, he casually said, "Don't waste your energy. I've already seen it. It is a large octopus. There are even sharp teeth on its tentacles. Now, what is this strange thing?" Gong He suddenly stopped talking. His face turned pale. The octopus you're talking about, is it light purple or red? It is about the same size as our ship. As for its color, it is dark red. Yin Nuoxing pointed at the ship under his feet and said in a serious and unusually calm manner, Gang Jun. The largest creature he had ever seen was the size of a planet or a star. A tentacle monster that was merely 10,000 feet in size was nothing to be surprised about. It was just that its species was a little special that was worth his attention. However, this was too exciting for Gong He and the others, especially when Gong He heard him say that it was dark red in color. His face was as white as the color of the sky at this moment. A dominator of the surging zone. My ancestors, this thing usually does not leave the center of the surging zone. Why did it come to the edge of the surging zone? Hearing the horrifying scream, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt his scalp go numb. He shrunk his neck and muttered desperately, It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not a troublemaker of this level. I'm not at the level where I will sprain my ankle, drink water, and go out to meet the heavenly God of the beginning. It has absolutely nothing to do with me. I think it has something to do with you. After all, you are a troublemaker of the highest level in the void. Yin Nuoxing turned into a grayish-white statue in the wind. This sentence was like a fatal blow to his heart. Suddenly, an even more violent tremor came from the sea of sand. Everyone had already understood what they had encountered from the conversation between the two people just now. Their expressions changed greatly. At this critical moment of life and death, Yin Nuoxing thought that they would cry and wail, complain about life and fate or something. Then, the group of people all put on a determined expression in the face of death in an instant. The energy stones in their hands exploded with the most dazzling light. They had activated their weapons to the extreme. That light made Yin Nuoxing feel a little blinded. Everyone, slow down the ship. Everyone, enter a deathmatch state. We have been targeted by the dominator of the surging zone. I repeat, everyone, enter a deathmatch state. Even if we can't kill it, we must at least break its armor. Tonight, we will eat grilled squid. Gong He suddenly swept away his frightened state. His eyes were wide open. His awe-inspiring righteousness exploded again, which made Yin Nuoxing shocked. But that frown was really funny. In this serious atmosphere, he couldn't be serious when he saw that frown. Fight! The response from the side made Yin Nuoxing stunned again. Seeing that everyone was holding the idea of mutual destruction, he was a little dumbfounded. Were these people the kind of creatures who would explode and explode a second time when they were in a desperate situation? Why were they hot-blooded now? Was this world within the sphere of influence controlled by Qing Jun? Achoo! In the distance, Qing Jun, who was overlooking the abyss of death fog from the top of the wall, suddenly sneezed that shook the whole city, startling countless people. Who is talking about me? Qing Jun rubbed his nose blankly. The act of Yin Nuo and the others barging into its territory and showing their fighting spirit seemed to have angered the crimson octopus swimming under the sea of sand. It rushed up violently, and its countless sharp teeth that looked like sharp swords tore the sea of sand apart. Its unusually wide tentacles were like long spears that pierced through the shackles of the sea of sand and tore the sea surface apart. Its huge body suddenly appeared in front of the three ships that had slowed down, and it was surrounded by huge tentacles that were like giant pillars that supported the sky. Yin Nuoxing stared at it. He didn't know where its eyes were. Weren't the octopus's eyes also on its head? How come its eyeballs were gone? He thought for a second, and simply used his spirit and soul to shock it directly into its mind. If you don't want to be the main dish on the grill tonight, get out of here. A clear circle of cyan energy halo suddenly burst out from under Yin Nuoxing's feet, startling everyone. Gong He and the others couldn't feel anything and were still in a daze, not knowing what to do. Then they saw the huge body of the big octopus in front of them suddenly tremble. Not only were the 8 tentacles trembling in front of it, but the sea of sand also trembled as a result. Its eyes suddenly appeared and stared at Yin Nuoxing in horror. Suddenly, its whole body slid back for a distance. All those tentacles trembled and retracted their sharp teeth, and then hurriedly drilled into the bottom of the sea of sand without any hesitation. Gong He and the others watched this scene in a daze, and the expressions on their faces became extremely wonderful. The atmosphere in the sea of sand suddenly became strange. They couldn't understand the power of the soul and spirit, so they could only treat the visual spiritual shock just now as an ordinary energy shock. There was no way for them to understand what was happening on the deeper level. Anyway, the power of this guy was beyond their imagination. They should have been numb to it by now, but seeing him suddenly scare away the ruler of the surging area? Wait a minute. Although Gong He didn't see this scene with his own eyes, it seemed to have happened twice. The last time was when they crossed the surging area not long ago, and this time, wait a minute, come back first. Yin Nuoxing suddenly remembered something. Another circle of cyan energy exploded from under his feet, and a wave of sand suddenly surged in the sea of sand about 10,000 meters away from them. The big crimson octopus from before appeared again, startling Gong He and the others. What surprised them even more was that the paragon was now reluctantly approaching them with a gloomy and happy face expression. This made them nervous, but little did they know that the octopus was even more nervous than they were. When the oval-shaped head was close enough, Yin Nuoxing directly shouted, "Escort us to where we want to go, and then you can leave." A strange voice echoed in everyone's minds. Gong He and the others' expressions changed drastically, and it took them a moment to understand that this might be the paragon's way of communicating with them, but it sounded a little gloomy, unwilling but unable to resist. The big octopus looked at Yin Nuoxing with its huge eyes, and after meeting the crimson eyes, it shivered and dived back into the sea of sand, then let one of its tentacles out of the sand to say, "I'm still here." It didn't want to pay attention to these little things at all, but that little thing was just too strong. The rest of the journey was relatively smooth. The fleet didn't encounter any strange sandworms, nor did they suddenly feel the sea of sand riding. It was still daytime, and the sky was dark because they were close to the edge of the surging zone. There was a majestic energy lingering in the air, and occasionally there would be thunder in the sky. 1 or 2 bolts of energy would strike the sand and blow a hole in the sea of sand. Even if there were no sandworms, the energy would still make their journey difficult. Gong He, on the other hand, was already mentally prepared. He had already activated his energy barrier before they encountered such a situation, and the energy bolts caused ripples on the barrier, but it was still within the acceptable range of the barrier. Well, the journey was really smooth, but the crimson tentacle on the side of the ship made them a little nervous, as if it would strike at them at any moment. Even though Yin Nuoxing repeatedly said that the big octopus wouldn't resist, they still felt very uneasy. While they were nervous, they also felt that it was very strange. In this inland sea of sand, who would have the privilege of being escorted by a paragon of the surging zone? If word got out about this, they could boast about it for 100 years, but they didn't know if anyone would believe it. Whoosh! The octopus suddenly popped its head out of the water. The sound of the rolling sand was similar to the sound of the waves, startling everyone. They quickly turned around and saw the octopus looking forward with a serious, human-like gaze. They were all stunned. Yin Nuoxing also turned her head and was also stunned. She asked casually, "What's wrong? Did you meet your enemy?" The tentacle turned and a buzzing sound rang in everyone's mind. They couldn't understand it, but judging from its slightly nervous mood, it must have felt that there was something blocking their way. Gong He quickly asked someone to use an energy stone to project the situation in front of them. The situation about 100 miles away was reflected on the spacious deck. Then everyone was shocked. A huge head was riding the wind and waves above the sea of sand. If they were not mistaken, the head should be the head of Seahorse. There were also many appendages extending from its body, swaying around. Looking at its dejected and weak appearance, it seemed like it had been treated badly by a non-insect. "We definitely didn't wash our faces before we came out today." Gong He was so surprised that he almost choked. "How can we meet 2 rulers at once?" He turned around and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was grayish-white and kept muttering, "It's not me. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not." He was shocked by his strange grayish-white state. What's wrong with you?" Yin Nuashing suddenly came back to her senses, and the grayish-white color on her body quickly faded. She laughed dryly and waved her hand. "Nothing, I just thought of something. Something not so good. It's nothing, so let's not talk about it. I'm almost traumatized." Yin Nuashing lazily heaved a sigh of relief. Just as she was wondering if there was a problem with her body's laws, she suddenly felt a familiar aura in her soul. She was stunned. This aura disappeared without a trace after they came to the sea urchin world. Even if the damage to the laws had completely healed, she couldn't find him directly. Now that she suddenly felt his aura, Foam, I found you. A cheering voice filled with endless surprise came from the end of the world, and it reverberated in the entire desert. Even the energy and thunder in the sky were restrained because of this shout. Yin Nuashing, Gong He, and the others found the source of the voice. There was a person standing on the seahorse's head, waving and shouting at them. But why did this situation feel so familiar? Gong He, drive over. Don't be nervous. Yin Nuashing suddenly relaxed. She crossed her arms and said with a smile, "There's no danger over there. It's my friend." In the end, she muttered in her heart, "Another thing, as the saying goes, when two things stand together, the positions of the rules will cancel each other out." The little angel instantly understood what he meant. She couldn't help but say, "It's also possible that they're overlapping and strengthening each other. Won't there be more accidents when you're together? Don't say any more." Chapter 1500. In the golden ocean under the scorching sun, 3 large ships drifted aimlessly on the golden ocean like a small boat in the ocean. They could not see the shore, nor could they find a place to dock. On the right side of the leading ship, 2 huge heads of mysterious creatures popped up. One had the head of an octopus, and the other had the head of a seahorse. The 2 former rulers of the surging area were now hanging their heads dejectedly as they escorted the 3 ships. Half an hour ago, they saw each other from 1,000 miles away. They looked at each other warily and entered battle mode. Then they realized that the other party was being controlled by the little ones. In an instant, the wariness in their eyes turned into sympathy. When the 2 beasts met, they used their tentacles to touch each other and talk. "Why are you here too? You're here too. What a coincidence. I was caught by the little one early in the morning. I've been wandering in the desert for a long time, but I still can't find the fun place he was talking about. You're still okay. I almost got barbecued." The seahorse and octopus sighed dejectedly at the same time. They patted each other's huge bodies with their tentacles to comfort each other. Gongyi's face twisted when he saw their sympathetic expressions. His worldview was on the verge of exploding. He then turned to look at Yin Nuashing and Hui, who were chatting with their arms around each other's shoulders. His cheeks and his funny eyebrows could not stop moving. His face was full of ferocity. He could not figure out how these 2 famous rulers of the surging area in the desert had been forced into such a pitiful state by them. The 2 beasts sensed Gongyi's gaze and raised their heads to look at him. Then, they carefully glanced at the 2 people beside him and heaved a long sigh. They didn't want to listen to him either, but they were too scared. They had roamed the desert sea for countless years, but they had never seen a little guy emit this kind of aura that could destroy everything. They couldn't even muster up the slightest bit of resistance. The journey was already ridiculously safe. After another person and a ruler who seemed to be equally powerful joined in, it seemed to be even more. Gongyi felt that even if all the forces of the Sand City were gathered, they would not be able to push them into the desert. "So, have you figured out this world?" Hui put his arm around Yin Nuashing's shoulder and asked in a low voice. "I want to ask you the same question. Are you slower than me in analyzing this world?" Yin Nuashing glared at him. "I'm at my wit's end. Our professions don't match, so there's nothing I can do. Besides, the primeval lord of heaven and earth is still suppressed in someone else's territory. The rules and order here tend to be in a very strange situation. They can actually block our soul communication. Even if the damage caused by the rules of this world is healed, there's no way to use soul communication. If it wasn't for my good luck, I wouldn't have been able to find you. Even you are being suppressed. Yin Nuashing was slightly stunned and showed a thoughtful expression. The suppression that Hui mentioned was definitely not the kind that was completely suppressed. He should not feel any pressure to get rid of the suppression. It was just that he did not know if it would cause any negative effects to this world. So he just let the suppression be. Anyway, it really did not affect him for the time being. If the immature laws of this world could also affect the primeval, then this fellow might be a new model compared to the cherub and the origin Kong, a new and more powerful model. Yin Nuashing's expression became even weirder as he thought about it. This should have been bad news, as it meant that the underworld's talent for creating weird things had been perfected. However, the three abyssal death shroud life forms created by the underworld were all rejecting their own creators, the chaos plane and the abyssal death shroud. That made Yin Nuashing's expression even more bizarre. It should have been bad news, as it meant that the underworld's talent for creating weird things had been perfected. However, the three abyssal death shroud life forms created by the underworld all rejected their creators, the chaos plane and the abyssal death shroud. If he was the guy in charge of creating these strange things in the underworld, he would have shut himself up after learning about this situation. As he thought about it, the smile on his face became more and more unbridled and twisted. Hui was stunned. What are you laughing at? That's weird. Nothing. I thought of something interesting. Yin Nuashing shook his head. Speaking of interesting things, Feng, let me tell you something else. Hui poked Yin Nuashing's back and whispered, we might come across those annoying things when we're out on vacation. You mean the abyssal death fog life forms? Yin Nuashing's gaze focused and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he reacted and rolled his eyes at Hui. What do you mean by vacation? Our scavenger mission is not over yet. It's not over until we go back. The little angel rolled her eyes when she heard that in the soul. She felt that the two fellows' relaxed demeanor was no different from vacation. The only difference was that while others were on vacation, they were on vacation to explore other people's worlds, enjoy the scenery of foreign lands, and meddle in the affairs of foreign lands. Ahem, that's what I mean. Anyway, back to the original topic, I found traces of the abyssal death fog here. But it's just a little bit, and it disappeared in a flash. It seemed to be in a hurry to do something. I don't know if it's the consciousness of this world, or some special power of this world, but it seems that it didn't notice that we had run into its territory. Yin Nuashing was silent as she heard that, and did not know what to say or judge. This world seemed to be divided into two parts like him. One part was filled with order on the surface, and the other part existed in the dark. Some weird and bad forces lurked in the dark, and the two forces of order were also fighting in the dark. In the burning land, the green blood of the sand, which represented order, had trapped the sandworms infected by the abyssal death fog. That was the only difference from him. The two forces in his body did not interfere with each other, and would only protest when he was crazy enough to use both forces together. Whatever the case may be, this newborn and immature world was still showing order for the time being, and it was a little resistant to the abyssal death fog, which was not on the side of order. As long as that was settled, what they needed to do was simple. Regardless of why it originated from chaos but sided with order, as long as it attacked the abyssal death fog, they would have a common topic to talk about and exchange some methods to control certain void pests. We don't have much time left. 2 or 3 more days in this world would probably be up. I have a suggestion. First, we need to find the world core of this world, or some sort of entanglement point of the rules, or at least connect with the world consciousness. If it has one, then do whatever we need to do, destroy whatever we need to destroy, kidnap whatever we need to kidnap. Yin Nuashing's face twitched as she listened to Huey's muttering. That guy had spouted a lot of bad words, and what he said was exactly what he wanted to do. It was just that he did not know how to deal with it at the moment. The conceptual layer of this world's rules is closed, and the size of this world itself is just that little. From what we have observed so far, this could be the evolution of a small world. If that's the case, there should be a special entanglement point of the rules inside this world, and we have to find it before we can proceed to the next step. The problem is he coughed dryly. At the moment, it seems that this world has noticed our entry and seems to be wary of us. After all, this is its territory. If it is determined to hide, it won't be that easy for us to find it. There's nothing we can do. We can only look for it. We can't just waste our time here. We don't have that much time. Hui shrugged helplessly. Yin Nuoxing's eyelids drooped slightly. After a moment of silence, she suddenly slapped Huey's hand away and walked towards Gong He, who was standing at the side of the ship. Gong He's expression was constantly changing. Gong He, do you know of any particularly strange places? Gong He, whose mind was filled with fantasies, snapped back to reality. He was slightly stunned when he heard what Gong He said. Particularly strange places? What do you mean? Gong He scratched his chest. Things that are slightly strange, originating from legends, rumors, or something else. I more or less know some of them, but I'm not too sure which places are particularly strange to you all, just based on these few words. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment. Things that are slightly stranger than the surging area. Things that are filled with countless dangers and chaos, or things like the origin of other dangers. The moment she opened her mouth, she pointed at some places that were not particularly good. Gong Yi's comical face trembled violently. What you said is really a strange place. Cough, cough, a dangerous place that is even more mysterious and strange than the surging area. Gong Yi fell into deep thought, pacing back and forth on the spot. The two giant beasts floating in the sea of sand had also finished stirring up emotions. When they heard what Gong He said, they poked their bodies out of the sea of sand with slight interest. If it's the sea of sand, there are probably only two places worth investigating. One is the deepest part of the surging area, and the other is another surging area. The surging area that we pass by today can be seen if we walk straight in from the right. The only place worth paying attention to in the sea of sand is here. Gong He scratched his chin as he spoke. When he saw Yin Nuoxing frown, he thought for a moment and said, "The only thing left is another area." Yin Nuoxing raised her head. "The Sea of the World?" "Yes, the Sea of Miracles." Gong He nodded. "We guard the inland and rarely go to the Sea of the World. When the environment there is calm, it is indeed much better than inland. Near the Sea of the World, there is also a part of the land that is green and rich in resources. However, if we really want to talk about danger, Seaside City is actually more dangerous. You came from there, so you should have heard of the Broken Seaside." Yin Nuoxing nodded. She originally wanted to go to the Broken Seaside, but in the end, she ended up inland. Inland has its own troubles. Although it is troublesome, it is still manageable. Compared to Seaside City, which is surrounded by the Sea of the World, it is actually a relatively peaceful place. The only things we have to deal with are the sandworms that occasionally disturb our peace. Although there are many powerful sandworms in the surging area, they will not deliberately attack the dominators of Sand City. Yin Nuoxing turned her gaze to the seahorse and octopus who were listening at the side. The two dominators trembled and hurriedly nodded. Their voices echoed in their minds. They could not understand what they were saying at all, but the meaning was the same, expressing their affirmation. However, in the case of Seaside City, once they encounter a threat from the world's sea, the city will basically be destroyed and everyone will die. No one will be spared. Gong Yi's face revealed a lingering fear as he spoke. What is this so-called threat from the Sea of the World? Yin Nuoxing frowned. After all was said and done, he never knew what this so-called threat was. The information he collected about the Broken Seaside did not mention it at all. If they were inland, they had to deal with sandworms, but if they were in the Sea of the World, they had to fight sea monsters. Gong He scratched his chest. "I don't know either. This has always been a point of curiosity. What exactly destroyed Seaside City?" Yin Nuoxing and Hui expressed their surprise at the same time. Hui could not help but feel a little excited. "Was your house destroyed by someone? In the end, no one knew about it? It's normal for you to think that since you have lost your memories." Gong He did not forget that Yin Nuoxing and his friends were all in Seaside City. He nodded in understanding. In fact, as far as I know, once a seaside city is destroyed, there will either be no survivors. Even those who accidentally saw it from afar will be involved in the disaster. Or, even if there are survivors, they will be like you, unable to remember anything. It is said that their brains have been tampered with and they have lost all their memories of what they saw at that time. So, until now, we still do not know what kind of disaster Seaside City is facing. If we use an energy stone to project it, we can only see a strange scene where nothing can be seen clearly, as if the energy stone is damaged. So, usually after a period of time, we will suddenly hear that a seaside city has become a broken seaside city. No one knows what happened in between. We have been studying this for thousands of years, but we have not been able to find any answers. Yin Nuashing and Hui looked at each other. This was very strange. They had thought of many ways to cause this situation, but there should not be such a level of power in this world. So they rejected it. After a few guesses, they finally threw all the blame to the king of void scapegoats, the abyssal death mist. Well, it was a very strange thing. There is no way to let the local life forms whose power level was too low discover the situation. It was strange and unexplainable, assuming that it belonged to the level of rules and the existence of the abyssal death mist in this world. With these three conditions put together, it was completely logical and reasonable for them to throw the blame to the girl. What? Evidence? What evidence do you need? They had been slapping each other's mouths in the void for over 100 million years, and from the looks of it, it would still be slapping each other for a few more eras. Would they have any complaints if they were to be slapped with one or two more crimes? To be honest, any problem that could not be solved in the world of order could be blamed on the stinky abyssal death shroud. Its existence would explain everything. The above was all because Yin Nuashing and the others were dissatisfied with the abyssal death mist. But the truth was not much different. In this world, the only logical thing was the world itself. A world born of the abyssal death mist, such a peaceful and orderly world, exuded the aura of the source world of the void from beginning to end. The more it was like this, the more suspicious it was. It was too deliberate, but it was not deliberately acting for anyone to see. It was just that it deliberately exposed the side of order of this world. The life forms in this world would not notice it, so they could sense the abnormality of this world. The sea of the world, huh? Yin Nuashing twirled her hair. They didn't have to go there. When they left the coastal city not long ago, they happened to see something that was neither too big nor too small. But before they left, they had to take a look at the two surging areas. Seems like someone is following us. Gong He suddenly opened his mouth and said something. Yin Nuashing and Hui turned their heads. There was nothing in the golden sea of sand. There was a hint of doubt in their eyes. No, it's not behind us. Gong He shook his head and pointed to the right. There's a very weak echo of the rolling sand coming from that direction. It has been about 20 minutes. I thought it was an illusion because it was too weak and difficult to detect, but has always been there. It's probably following us from a further place. They probably don't dare to get close to the surging area like us and walk along the edge. Yin Nuashing and Hui looked in that direction at the same time. Their gazes crossed the layers of golden sand dunes and saw that there was indeed a huge fleet. The fleet was painted light red, and there were thousands of ships. Yin Nuashing would believe that it was a sand city that had come out in full force. It's the fleet from the blockade. They actually caught up with us. Yin Nuashing frowned slightly. That's strange. When we passed through the blockade, I personally controlled it. It was impossible for any marking energy to be stained. How did they chase us to this place? Gong He's expression changed. Yin Nuashing looked at him. Stop the ships. Gong He nodded and ordered the 3 ships to stop where they were. The energy of the power stone gradually dissipated. The 3 ships slid out for 100 or 200 meters and stopped in various ways. The 2 giant beasts also dived into the sea under the instructions of Yin Nuashing and Hui and quieted down temporarily. There was indeed a roar coming from the horizon. It was very weak. After the ships stopped, everyone could hear it more clearly. Moreover, the sound over there was also weakening. It seemed that they were also slowing down. They stopped too. Yin Nuashing suddenly reported the situation and looked at Gong He. Can the energy stone see the situation over there? It's so far away. Plus, the energy in the surging area is so strong. Logically speaking, it's impossible, Gong He said calmly. Then it's a special situation. Yin Nuashing muttered and suddenly looked up at the sky. I'm watching you. This was probably what it wanted to say to them. However, it was very strange. It obviously did not want to come into contact with them. Even if it wanted to warn them, it would use some subtle means to warn them. Moreover, the light red fleet said that they were looking for the core of the green blood of the sand. They were so murderous. He felt that something was not right. The energy in the underground hole did not weaken with the disappearance of the core. It could not be that it would send people to capture them for the sake of the core, right? Even the people living in this world. If the entire world civilization had not been in contact with the world consciousness since the beginning of civilization, who would believe that something like the world's consciousness would appear out of nowhere? Feng, are we being watched? Hui pointed to the sky and said. Yin Nuashing frowned and nodded hesitantly. But the situation is not right. They should be coming for something in my hand. But I feel that something is not right. When the rumbling in the sky stopped completely and the entire sky returned to normal, Gong He and the others felt a chill run down their spines. They had encountered too many strange things today, so many that their brains could not process them all. Yin Nuashing's eyes flashed. Let's set sail. They're coming for us. After we send you to a safe place, we will leave. Otherwise, you'll be implicated. Gong He wanted to say something, but when he met Yin Nuashing's firm and unquestionable gaze, his comical eyebrows trembled slightly. After hesitating for a while, he swallowed all the words in his stomach and nodded. All right, the little angel did not forget to make fun of them. Look, the two things have been forced away. The effect has doubled. How long has it been since the two of you met? And the world's will has already targeted you. Girl, I beg you to stop talking. Yin Nuashing was about to cry. In the future, if he really wanted to carry the title of troublemaker throughout the void, this girl would definitely be the main contributing factor. Chapter 1501. Sometimes, it was a little hard to understand and inconceivable. It was like every life would have one or two useless innate abilities in their lifetime. It was a matter of course. However, Yin Nuashing expressed that she did not understand when her innate abilities of misfortune and troublemaker were given to her. If she was in the realm of the gods, it would be fine if she attracted a lot of strange things because she was an observer, but in the realm of the gods, there were not many strange things for her to encounter. However, when she came to the outside world, she encountered some strange things every day. They were the kind of strange things that could be easily solved, but just their existence alone made her not know whether to laugh or cry. Just like now, the golden sea was sparkling. From afar, it looked like a mirror reflecting the light of the sun in the distant sky. The ground was filled with flashing golden scales and golden light. Two huge, strange creatures were swimming towards the depths of a sea of sand with a depressed and resentful expression. They were depressed because there was a small dot on their heads. As for resentment, they looked behind them and saw that the light red fleet was approaching them with 100,000 firepower. The strange giant creatures created by the small dots were surging with an unusual amount of energy, which made the two of them feel a little scared. When they moved, they shrank back and did not move as they pleased. Half an hour ago, after sending Gong, He, and the others to a safe area outside Sand City, Yin Nuashing and Hui brought the two sovereigns and left without looking back. Following them were the light red ships that followed behind them. No matter where they went, those bugs would know where they were. This made them feel a little depressed. Using the power of the world's consciousness to do whatever they wanted, doing whatever they wanted, there was a price to pay. The current situation was still developing between the two of them. Mainly, they were still within the range of Yin Nuashing's silence, so they did not immediately make a move to crush the fleet behind them in the sea of sand. They needed to observe the other side of things. They wanted to see what the world's consciousness wanted to do, and whether it was prepared to face the consequences of making such a choice. After all, We are in someone else's territory. We can only restrain ourselves a little. Hui exhaled a long breath, holding a round energy crystal in his hand. If that thing exploded, it could probably wash the world back and forth a few hundred times. He turned around and looked at Maple, who was sitting on the octopus head. Seeing his gloomy expression, he said, "Calm down, Maple. There won't be any problems." Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and glanced at him. She sighed faintly. "I'm not worried about anything. I just don't understand why it's so obsessed with the core that even if it doesn't exist, it won't be a big deal." Bang! Bang! About 10 meters behind them, a violent energy explosion suddenly occurred. An energy shockwave that was enough to annihilate all matter within 100 meters slowly rose behind them. It looked quite spectacular, but didn't cause any substantial damage to them. Hui turned his head to look at the bright, white energy impact and whistled. "How many times has it been? 21st time?" 27th, Yin Nuoxing muttered as she took out a small notebook and drew a line on it. Holding a grudge. It was also something that happened in the past half an hour. The light red fleet behind them would seize every opportunity to attack them. No one knew who gave them the courage. Well, they only had 2 people and 2 giant beasts. They looked quite weak, but the other party had hundreds of times more people than them. In a situation where they had an absolute advantage in numbers, it was very normal for the fleet to choose to attack. After all, it was just numbers. Whether they could win or not would only be determined after one of them was wiped out. Yin Nuo planet could not stand the harassment and counterattacked once or twice. With a slap, it pressed a few ships of their fleet into the sea of sand. A few ships full of energy gathered together and triggered a violent energy explosion. It was gorgeous, but it was a little expensive. He originally thought that the intimidation that time would make them more obedient, but they didn't seem to have any intention of restraining themselves at all. Instead, they were getting closer and closer. There were a few times when Yin Nuoxing wanted to directly crush them to death, but he was stopped by Hui. God knows what the world's consciousness was thinking. It couldn't be that it really thought that it could serve them well by sending these minions over. No matter what, it should use the power of the entire world to deal with them in a fair fight. And since it could mobilize the army of a city, it should be able to mobilize the other forces of this world. As for why it couldn't, Yin Nuoxing and Hui had no idea. Anyway, the situation had become a little strange. And as for how strange it was, either there's something wrong with its head, or the consciousness of chaos hasn't developed well. It wants to deal with us, but it doesn't have the strength. Hui shrugged and said, the only thing they were thankful for now was that it hadn't used the power of this world and the laws of this world to deal with them. Sure enough, it was still something wrong. It didn't use the pure power of this world, but instead sent a group of minions to deal with them. This couldn't even be considered test. It was simply sending food on a platter, and it was a platter with technical content. Looking at the size of the fleet, it was obvious that it knew that they had great power. How far are we from the surging area? Yin Nuoxing pressed her hand on the big head that was sitting under her. It was soft, and it was actually not very comfortable to sit on. A buzzing sound was transmitted in her mind, and Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. 4 or 5 minutes. That's good. We should have entered the surging area by now, right? The big octopus shook its tentacles to show that it was sure. There was an explosion of energy behind them. Yin Nuoxing and Hui turned around. The energy exploded more than 100 feet away from them. They seemed to be unable to continue into the surging area. It was the same just now. They didn't want to set foot in the surging area. They could only follow at the edge. Even if they had the protection of the world's consciousness, it seemed that they couldn't trespass into these places. Just as Yin Nuoxing was thinking, he saw a huge circle of pale, red energy suddenly spread towards the horizon. He and Hui both turned their attention to it. The pale red energy circle enveloped the entire area, like a blockade circle that surrounded the place. Is this the blockade order you mentioned? We looked at it curiously. Well, there's several energy nodes. Every part of the blockade circle is guarded by a considerable amount of energy. In a world of this level of energy, It's a very powerful way to use energy. But this thing is completely useless against us. Yin Nuashing covered his mouth as he yawned and rolled his eyes. Then he suddenly froze. He raised his head slightly. There was a bad atmosphere spreading to this world. It was weak and faint, but it made him feel a very familiar bad thing. Hui, do you feel it? Yin Nuashing stretched and yawned. The thought, it's just formed. Hui used his soul to scan the world. Then, he was a little surprised. What are these people going to do? All the people are armed to fight against the foreign enemies. Yin Nuashing replied faintly. They had just used their own power to scan this world, and found that in addition to the light red fleet, there were a lot of fleets suddenly gushing out of the Sand City, pointing in their direction at the moment with murderous intent. And at this moment, all the fleets leaving the city were heading towards them. Some fleets that were originally wandering outside suddenly changed their course and headed towards them. Almost 70% of the human race's power in this world had gathered, and they were completely prepared to perish together. Seeing this, Yin Nuashing and Hui Du looked dignified. It seemed that the consciousness of chaos was not only brainless, but also a little confused and a little intoxicated. After looking at each other, both of them sighed helplessly. They couldn't kill them over such a trivial matter. And now, the development of the situation was getting stranger and stranger. They couldn't figure out what the newborn consciousness of the world was going to do. It had such an obvious intention to attack. If it had the ability to directly use the power of the world and the power of the rules, then they would have a chance to fight back. Why did it send a group of cannon fodders to crush them in the face? What was this? The formation of this idea meant that most of the intelligent and spiritual beings in this world. This was referring to the human race here. It seemed that the sandworms had not made any moves yet, had the same idea, and that was to get the two of them out of here or kill them on the spot. The group of people in the light red fleet did not listen to human words. They could not get any response from communicating with them. They could not understand what those people were thinking at all. Sometimes, Yin Nuashing even felt that the group of people chasing behind him was like a group of evil spirits. He did not know whether he had feelings or surely. It seemed that ever since they came to this sea urchin world, things had always been strange. They didn't have time to do anything, but inexplicably attracted the attention of the chaotic consciousness of this world. They dug a stone, and the chaotic consciousness of this world burst a blood vessel. Now, it even asked all the humans to pick up weapons and fight fiercely with them. Logically speaking, it would be easy for them to kill all the life in this world, including the chaotic consciousness itself. But now, the situation was too confusing. They didn't know what had happened, but it suddenly developed into this situation. Did they really have to destroy this world? I'm fine, but Feng, your patience should be running out soon, right? Hui stretched and said to Yin Nuashing with a smile. Yin Nuashing glanced at him and nodded casually. Those who knew him well would know that his patience was running out when they saw his slightly gloomy expression. If he waited a little longer, he would definitely explode and be destroyed. No, you said that we have to endure it. After all, we still have to come into contact with the chaotic consciousness of this world, Hui said while holding back his laughter. The veins on Yin Nuashing's forehead bulged, and his face showed that he was trying hard to suppress his irritation. Even if we have to endure it, we can't endure it like this. Why is it allowed to slap us in the face, but we can't slap it in the face? If we want to fight, we have to be mentally prepared to be pressed to the ground at any time. This is obviously an act of hostility. Why should I? Okay, I'll endure it for a little longer. Well, don't be anxious. Hui looked at a certain flammable and explosive object and forced himself to swallow his anger. When Hui glared at him, he quickly restrained his expression, coughed dryly, and said solemnly, "Anyway, with our strength, this world won't hurt us no matter what it does. At most, it will be a little annoying. We can use our own actions to get rid of them and find out the reason why the chaotic consciousness of this world suddenly attacked us crazily. Or we can just kill them without caring about anything. But if there really is a reason behind this, We have no fate with this world's chaotic consciousness. After all, when we first arrived, it didn't do anything at all. It just suddenly went crazy. It probably went crazy when you said it took a stone from someone else. Yin Nuashing, there were still 3 or 4 of those stones underground. Did it have to chase him all over the world for this thing? And from the looks of it, they didn't seem to want to chase him back. They just wanted to press him to the ground and beat him up. It doesn't matter, whether it's to understand the underworld's information or to obtain the power to suppress the abyssal death mist. Feng, do you really think that if we obtain the power to suppress the abyssal death mist from this world, we can easily turn the situation around? At most, it'll be better if we have a little more strategy. Yin Nuashing shook his head decisively. The abyssal death mist was indeed the underworld's most powerful force. But to be complete, there should be 2 words at the end. First, the underworld's strength came from their own strength. They had more than one primeval life form, and they also had more than one primeval life form. In addition, they also had the ability to erode and disturb the Order Void. Under these conditions, if they really wanted to attack, the Order Void would not last long. Using the abyssal death mist was the cheapest, fastest, and most convenient way. It could greatly reduce their own losses and allow them to easily take over the Order Void. On the other hand, even if they could withstand the attack of the abyssal death mist with a very small price, it would not be easy to continue resisting the attack of the underworld, a race of gods. In any case, the final ending of the entire era would only lead to the only inevitable ending. His shallow resistance to try to change that ending was ultimately unrealistic. Now, the more he knew and understood, the more he felt that the ending was a binding abyss used to end all his fantasies and all his self-righteous reversals. Then it settled. Hui shrugged. He thought so too. Now, let's wait and see for a while. Let's first find a reason why the world will of this world suddenly went crazy. If we can find it, then we'll look for it. If we can't find it, or if it's just crazy, then it's not too late to blow it up. After that, we'll have to find someone and rush back to the Order Void. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh and nodded in agreement. For now, it was indeed better. They came all the way here, and, of course, they did not want to blow up something and run away. There was another main reason, and that was that it seemed to be of the same race as the little girl. If possible, he also hoped to keep it. But that was not a reason for him to let it do whatever it wanted. It didn't take long for them to find the destination of the surging area. It was a sunny day, but the sky was dark and gloomy. It was as if the sky and the earth were giving off an unhealthy feeling, which made them feel disgusted for no reason. Buzz. The giant octopus muttered a few words in Yin Nuashing's mind. It seemed to be saying that although this place was very rich in energy and it did not have any substantial effect on them, the feeling here was not very good. It just made them feel disgusted, so they would not come to this place if they had nothing to do. Yin Nuashing jumped down from the giant octopus's head. Just as they stepped on the lightless desert, a sudden gust of wind blew in their faces. At the same time, there was an abnormal and very disgusting stench. It was as if the smell of the dead and some indescribable things had been left here for 10,000 years. The smell was still sealed, and now it was all over their faces. Yin Nuashing and Hui rolled their eyes. They almost purified this place together. Can you guys become smaller? Yin Nuashing turned around and looked at the huge octopus and the seahorse life form and said. The 2 giant beasts looked at each other and mumbled as they shrank their bodies. After a while, their bodies wriggled and shrank to the size of only 2 to 3 feet. They still looked a little big, but they were much smaller than their original size. They floated on the sand beside the 2 and slowly turned their heads to look at this place. They were also curious about this place that they did not often come to. It would be better if the smell here was better. The smell here was so disgusting that they wanted to drill their heads into the sand. This smell, this disgusting smell, this feeling. Hui was still breathing in the wind, and now his handsome face was green and black. Is the abyssal death mist here? King gone bad? Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. Could the abyssal death shroud have changed? Seriously, he could tell that it was the abyssal death shroud the moment he stepped into this place. However, the abyssal death shroud they had encountered in the past would have dealt a huge blow to their spirit, since it lasted for 100 million years. However, the abyssal death shroud in this place had a huge impact on their physiology and body. Even energy life forms would feel that they had dimmed a little. Normal abyssal death shroud would not emit such a weird smell. Damn it, there was no smell at all. At most, it would make them feel that something was wrong with their senses and order. This pungent smell before them was no different from an exploding cesspool. He clutched his stomach and throat, his face contorted. Luckily, I'm an energy life form. Otherwise, I would be eloquent now. Yin Nuoxing felt that he was talking about physical eloquence, and it was a statement and not a description. He had the same feeling too, just not as strong. The two behemoths said that they had almost vomited out the energy they ate last year. At this moment, they could see that the seahorse and the octopus had changed color. The seahorse was now blue. Yin Nuoxing could not remember what color it used to be, but the octopus had changed from dark red to a poisonous purplish black, with green and red spots all over its body. A normal person would probably die just by touching it. Why do you have such a weird change too? Yin Nuoxing could not help but ask. The octopus said that the environment of the energy field here was not very good. The smell was a little strong, and it was a little uncomfortable for them. Their bodies would have all kinds of strange reactions to deal with this change. Yin Nuoxing simply put an energy barrier on them. The bodies of the two sovereigns, which had become colorful, immediately recovered. Then they stretched and showed that they were comfortable. The power of the abyssal death mist is not something that can be easily adapted to. No matter how strange your colors become, you won't be able to adapt to it. Don't leave the barrier. After warning the two behemoths, Yin Nuoxing and Hui walked inside together. We could not help but say after 2 steps, "Oh my God, this smell directly penetrates into my soul. Oh my God, what the hell is this? Why don't I remember that the abyssal death mist has such a disgusting function?" This sea urchin world is formed by the abyssal death mist. In theory, the existence of this world itself is a huge condensation of the abyssal death mist. Since the abyssal death mist is allowed to be distorted by the green sand blood, it probably allows the abyssal death mist to be strengthened or something here. No, it's disgusting. After saying a few words, Yin Nuoxing felt that his nose and mouth were filled with the disgusting smell of decay. He quickly waved his hand, and the bright, white energy of order formed a storm and swept out. At the same time, a layer of barrier covered the two of them. Only then did they feel a little better. I also smell the disgusting that stands on the concept of loss. At this moment, the little angel let go of the hand that was covering her nose and mouth. She panted and said, "You're also affected?" Yin Nuoxing paused for a moment and frowned slightly. If that was the case, the smell was an indiscriminate influence. Even the little angel, who was of the same kind, was affected. However, within the rotten smell, he also felt another kind of smell. It was mixed with a tint of the smell that was similar to the sins of the world, the smell of a mixture of evil and the power of death. The abyssal death mist of this world must have eaten something bad. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.